you feeling stuck making minimum payments on your credit card debt? SaveWithConrad.com can help, and you don't need perfect credit or money out of your pocket to do this. NMLS number 65084, equal housing lender. Oh, and did I mention no house payments for 2 months? Get rid of your credit card debt and lower your monthly payments right now at SaveWithConrad.com.
Hey, race fans, Hall of Famer Darrell Waltrip here. You know it's time to drop the green flag on another edition of Leaning Right and Turning Left with Sadler and the Senator, powered by Pace-O-Matic. So, hey, pull those belts tight one more time. Here's my buddy Hermie Sadler and Senator Bill Stanley. Boogity, boogity, boogity. Let's see what they have to say, boys and girls.
I'm Virginia State Senator Bill Stanley, and I am leaning right.
And I'm former NASCAR driver and Fox Sports analyst Hermie Sadler, and I am turning left, leaning right and turning left with Sadler and the Senator, as always, powered by Pace-O-Matic.
Afternoon, gentlemen. How we doing?
So how are we going to handle the introduction of our... Now, look, I want to say up front, you guide the ship when it comes to the podcast. We're trying.
Did you say ship or did you say another word?
Yeah. We're trying something new for the first time today. Senator, do you want to elaborate before we enable our third panel member to introduce himself?
Absolutely. I think I should take control, since this is the only thing in our business ventures that I do control, or at least try to control, and it never works out that way either way. But yes, we have a new advertiser. We have a new sponsor that's come on board.
I'm not even talking about that. I'm not talking about that yet.
Oh, okay. I'm
talking about the fact that we have got a 3-man booth, all remote for the first time ever on the podcast.
Sure.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, fine. I'll talk about that. You
just can't wait to talk about your balls.
I'm
trying to set up the
doodads. I'm here at the mothership of the Stanley Law Group, here in the Stanley Law Group studios in the conference room at the beautiful Holland Duncan House. And we have 3 people, a throuple of podcasting, so to speak. Hermie, you're there in Emporia at the Sadler Brothers Oil headquarters, I believe. And then we have back as our sidekick, again, our plus one, the man who needs not much of an introduction, but might need bail after getting a phone call like this.
You have an incoming call from
Shep Moss,
an inmate at the Mecklenburg County Correctional Facility. To accept this call, please press 1.
We pressed 1. He's on again. Everybody, Shep Moss. Hey, Shep.
God, that's just a gift that keeps on giving. Thanks, Senator.
Absolutely.
Hermie, how y'all doing today?
We're doing great. So we're trying for the first time with the idea of having all 3 of us on and doing it remotely for the first time. So if there are any growing pains, we apologize up front, but I'm sure Brad Tuesday can make us all look and sound eloquent as always.
Just like Manscaped.
I gotta tell you, I do miss being with you guys, so it's a little different feel. I miss being with y'all.
Yeah, I like it better when all 3 of us are there together. It's nice.
Yeah.
And actually, Shep, where are you today, so that you can tell the audience, while you're not with me here at the Stanley Law Group mothership, you are not in Emporia with Sadler Brothers Oil, with Herm. Where are you?
I am based at the Boyd Automotive World Headquarters in downtown beautiful South Hill, Virginia.
Excellent. Are you selling cars? We actually heard you were talking to people about what, rebates before you got on there?
Rebates and discounts. Yes, sir.
How's the car business?
We are busy.
How's the car business?
Car business is good. We're having a great had a great September and a good start to October.
So Bill, do we want to get Shep to give us an update on his town council situation before he does his sponsor read, or we want to get the sponsor read in first?
I think that's a good idea, because
I really don't have an update.
Okay,
because
that takes care of that one.
Town council meeting. Well, our town council meeting is October the 10th. I can just briefly tell you there's really been no update, no more communication between the town attorney and myself or my attorney. So I really don't have an update.
For those that may be,
everything's kind of quiet.
So the show is sponsored by Pace-O-Matic. Leaning Right is sponsored by Charlie's Waterfront Cafe. Turning Left is sponsored by Vista Installations. Shep, who are you sponsored by?
Well, I've been told the town council segment is being sponsored officially by Manscaped. And I'm excited to be the spokesperson and representative for them in this podcast.
Well, tell us some more about it,
Commercial you
Shep.
can read for us? Or?
Well, look, it's October is here, so I want to welcome everybody to Fresh Fall Ball. It's the season of pumpkin spice and making sure that your crotch looks nice. That means sipping cider in a fall breeze and using Manscaped products to trim your balls with ease. That's right. Today's show and Shep's segment is brought to you by Manscaped, a company here to make sure that your foliage isn't the only thing shedding its excess leaves. Heck, even Mother Nature knows it's time to lose that excess clutter for fall. Join the 6 million men and me, Shep Moss, who have trusted Manscaped by going to manscaped.com for 20% off, plus free shipping if you use the code Sadler. That's SADLER at checkout.
Well,
That's right, when you go to checkout.
Shep. That's great.
When you go to checkout, you got to use the code name Sadler to get that benefit, and I think it's a really good benefit. Listen, I've gotten the whole package. I got the Platinum Package 4.0, and I'm going to tell you, seriously, we got it because we were to try it out to see if this was some sponsor that we'd want to have on the show. I use the body wash. I use the shampoo and conditioner. I use the trimmers. I use the refresher. I use it all. And
so you did your due diligence on this sponsor.
It's put 10 years back on my life. It really has. I feel like a 45-year-old right now. So, I know Hermie's a little shy about this. Shep, I know you just dive right in. You're a guy that says, hey, man, let's make this work. But this really is a good product, and I think we as men owe it to ourselves. They have manicure and pedicure places. They got places where women can go get their hair done. Well, we can do our hair right in our own home. How about that?
You daggone it right.
Talking about being shy, the funniest thing I saw this week was, and I'm sure Senator Stanley was behind it, there was an ad that popped up on Facebook, Manscaped, on the podcast, and it had a picture of me from 1993 when I was driving the Virginia's for Lovers Chevrolet, and newsflash, I didn't need Manscaped back in those days.
Yeah, you
so
look pretty young.
A little bit pre. You
looked a little young, but Virginia's for Manscaped today.
I don't think Manscaped would give you that look again today either. Not being ugly, but a whole different time back then.
Well, so how has, since you're the official spokesperson, Shep, and we welcome all of our viewers to, go to Manscaped and use that code Sadler to get 20% off. What has your experience been with Manscaped? Senator Stanley seems to have had wonderful results.
Well, I can tell you I have had no chafing, however you want to pronounce that. It's a very refreshing feeling. It makes me look a little thinner. So I think between Manscaped and the weight loss challenge that we're in, I'm very optimistic about the results. I think my better half is going to enjoy it as well. So.
There you go. And,
that's who we need to get a report from.
Yeah, that's a great thing we need to get a report from. But, with this weight loss challenge, the three of us have entered a weight loss challenge. See who can lose the most weight over the holidays. Come back our first podcast in January, have a weight off to determine who could be the lightest of the three, who lost the most weight. And it could come down to who Manscaped right before the weigh-in. I mean, it could be that close. But so Hermie's not doing it. So we already have an advantage with Manscaped at manscaped.com.
I got to just go ahead and complain. We're probably going to have to, being that Manscaped is going to be a regular part of the show, and it's going to be something that Senator Stanley is going to make sure that we abide by and use the products that we advertise on the show. We're going to have to probably reweigh the next time we're all in the same building, because I have historically tried to maintain proper grooming, and Shep has probably had enough hair on him prior to Manscaped to weave an Indian blanket. So he's going to lose an unfair amount of weight prior to, or get that advantage, before we come back for the weight loss challenge. So, Shep, would you be in favor of potentially, once we're all quote unquote ready for fall, that we do a reweigh and kind of reset the whole gimmick? Because you wouldn't want to win this competition simply because of the fact that you were hairier than we were before we started using these products.
Yeah, I don't want any technicalities to get in the way of this victory. Actually, Hermie, I'm a little concerned to be honest, I saw you guys 2 weeks ago at the golf tournament. I'm a little concerned that the winner of our challenge may actually be in positive territory.
Yeah, that's a real possibility. Senator?
Well, it's a weight loss challenge. We didn't say whether it was negative or positive. The winner's the winner, the one that's lost the most or gained the least. But yeah, I mean, you guys have had
I think that's a real possibility.
You guys have had a pretty busy schedule. I mean, you've got weddings, you've got birthday cakes. Somebody's been in the Bahamas drinking, Miami Vices?
Miami Vices.
I like my chances. I think I'm the dark horse to come back in the last stretch, in the home stretch, and actually pull this thing off. But we love having Manscaped as our sponsor. It helps millions of men. A lot of the people who are listening to this podcast have reached out, used the promo code Sadler. They've ordered the product. I would recommend go for the Platinum Package 4.0. You get the shavers. You get the ball toner.
Platinum Package 4.0. Yeah. You could use the crown jewel of care for your family jewel.
That's right.
In the Platinum Package, is the razor gold like my microphone?
Yeah, and it's gentle. It's not going to clip you. It's not going to hurt you. It's not going to... It's easy to use. It even has a light, so if you're doing it in the dark, it has a light on the end of the shaver. You can see where you're going. So it's
y'all are the experts. But as I look down, as I proof this ad, it brings into question something called a lawnmower. How does that fall into the Manscaped package?
Well, if I can speak to that, see, both of us can speak to it. But go ahead, Shep. I want to hear your version.
Oh, absolutely not. No, sir. I would never step in front of you on this.
A lawnmower, 4.0 body trimmer, and weed whacker. So, Senator, we need to, if they're all part of this Platinum Package 4.0, we need to let the listeners know kind of what is a lawnmower in Manscaped terms and a weed whacker.
Well, think of a lawnmower in the same way.
He's probably familiar with the whacker.
Think of the lawnmower in the way that you think of your lawnmower. I mean, would you let your grass grow really high out in the front yard? I mean, where everybody can see it. I mean, they'd say, oh, my God, how unsightly is that? They'd even maybe call the city and say that you were violating some zoning ordinance. Think of it the same way that the Lawnmower 4.0 body trimmer is the same way. Keeps the grass low, makes it very attractive. Nobody complains. That's what the Lawnmower 4.0 body trimmer is all about. The Weed Whacker nose trimmer is actually really painless. And it keeps those long nose hairs that I always see coming out of Shep's nose. Keeps them under control. Yeah. Don't see one here on the video that we're looking at each other today, so it looks like he's using that Weed Whacker nose and ear hair trimmer to good use.
Quick question, Senator. You talked about the grass in the front yard, keeping that low. Does that mean that you let your backyard just grow out of control?
Unlike some of your friends, I am not the hairiest MFer you've ever seen. So there's no grass in the backyard. There's no grass.
If we're going to try to get a Manscaped package for Andy, do they have an industrial size that we could potentially?
They would have to go to the 5.0 for Andy. That would definitely have to be.
Now, what if last question, then we'll move on. This is all well and good, but what if Mrs. Moss or Mrs. Stanley? What if they prefer to be stuck like in the 70s? What if they don't prefer the modern approach?
Shep, you can take that one.
I'm speechless. We lose a sponsor.
My wife is younger than me.
Absolutely not.
By a generation, so she does not have such a problem. She listens to 70s on 7 like on Sirius, but she doesn't live that lifestyle. So I think we're pretty good.
I would encourage all the female listeners to this podcast, and it's a ton of them. The good looks that us three have, it's just loaded with lady listeners. I would encourage all of them with the holidays right around the corner to go to manscaped.com, use that 20% off code Sadler, enjoy your discount and free shipping for the holidays.
And again, you can't stress enough, Sadler, promo code Sadler, Sadler.
The moral of the story is, to our listeners, if you want to continue to hear us doing this dumbass commercial every week, if you buy the product, they will stay on the podcast and we'll keep talking about it. Is that really, isn't our sponsorship based on how many units, no pun intended, we sell on the podcast?
and service. How many units we can service as well with these great products that they have. Whether it's the lawnmower 4.0 body trimmer, the weed whacker nose and ear hair trimmer. You've got the when you do the premium package, you get the deodorant. Of course, may not smell like pumpkin spice, but it's cologne quality fragrance. I use it. It's great. Keeps you dry. Leaves no marks. You got the crop preserver, which is for your doodads. It's a little deodorant for your doodads. For your canastas.
It just keeps getting better.
Oh, God.
Is that so you know, and that's not all. That's not all. You can get the crop preserver doodad deodorant, and you also get free gifts. You get boxers and a travel bag that you can put all your great Manscaped products in. I mean, you got to go to manscaped.com and get 20% off and free shipping with the promo code Sadler, SADLER. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com when you use that promo code Sadler. Ladies and gentlemen, men out there, listen to me. Clear out the leaves. It's your tree trunk's time to shine. Manscaped.com.
So if you want to continue to hear this ad weekly, go buy this product. And before we get to the show, I'll let everybody know that I'm going to go to church tonight and spend a little time at the altar. And I also want to say that Pace-O-Matic is an entertainment company which develops gaming software that players love to play and can use their skills to win every single time. Plus, these games of skill provide vital revenue to keep family-owned businesses like bars, restaurants, convenience stores, and truck stops thriving. So what do we do for a follow-up now, Senator?
Oh, no, I think we end the show right there. So I think what we do is we can jump in, to our Leaning Right moment. But I wanted to, and it's kind of the Leaning Right moment, which is sponsored by Charlie's Waterfront Cafe, Tom Graziano, and the great people there. You've got the Tasting Cellar at the bottom, located in Farmville, Virginia. He's got the great bakery, great food, great fun. Go out and say hi to Tom for me, and enjoy yourself one of the best meals you can ever have in Farmville, Virginia, period. But what I've noticed here, Hermie, because you're an expert at gas prices and everything else, Biden, of course, said he had nothing to do with the rise in gas prices. They rised enormously. I mean, they're like $6 in California.
Oh, he blamed that on us, the retailers.
Right. Then he told you guys to lower your prices. Then when they started coming,
do it now.
Yes, and then they started coming down, and he started taking all the credit for it. He was taking the petroleum reserve, which, of course, the barrels of I guess it was oil that Trump had bought it cheaply, and then was selling it to China. Now what we're seeing is he goes to OPEC. And he says, please up your production. And what does OPEC do? OPEC and Russia work together and they vote to slash oil output, ignoring Biden completely. Gas prices are back on the hike. And again, Biden says, it's your fault, Mr. Gas Producer, gas seller. You need to lower your prices. And obviously, it's not his fault again that they're going up. They're only to his credit when they go down. What's going on, Hermie? I mean, you're on the front lines. You know exactly what's happening. Why are our gas prices going back up?
I can tell you as I sit here, we're taping on a Wednesday afternoon, October the 5th. I expect by the time we get pricing for today that fuel and gas, the cost of fuel and gas wholesale price, now this is not necessarily, I have no way of knowing how quickly these prices are going to be reflected at the pump because that's a kind of by market thing. But I would expect by the end of the day today, we'll see over a 40-cent a gallon increase in the cost of gas and fuel just in the last 3 days.
Wow.
And that is because you mentioned OPEC, which really stands for something like the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. There's like 13 countries involved in this production and distribution of crude. And we're talking about countries like Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, all these places, Senator, that really love us, Yeah. They really want to see us thrive and do well in the United States. That's a joke, by the way. But we are, because this administration has chosen to pull the plug on domestically produced energy and they want to drive everybody to electric vehicles. Well, in the meantime, that we've put all of our eggs in the basket of OPEC, and we are completely reliant on OPEC. We're having to beg them to produce energy and crude, and what they're saying is they're going to reduce to get pricing back up for their benefit. They're going to reduce production about 2 million barrels per day, And so the market reacted to that, and that's why we've seen about 40 cents a gallon increase in the cost of gas and fuel the last couple of days. It'll be more by the end of the week, and by the time we get to end of October and headed towards Thanksgiving, gas will probably be higher than we've seen it at any point since Joe Biden took office. That's just my prediction.
Now,
Senator, I have a question.
Yeah, but Shep, how's that going to affect?
I have a question for you.
Hold on now, Shep. How's that going to affect? I think demand caused gas prices to come down. That is lack of demand, people traveling less. How's that going to affect the car industry, especially when you're balancing not only perhaps higher gas prices, car prices are going up because you can't get some of the parts, can't get some of the chips. And now you've got, this electric overload with, trying to push electric cars. How do higher gas prices affect your industry there at Boyd Chevrolet or Boyd Dodge?
And higher interest rate. And higher interest
rates.
Let's not forget that.
Right.
So, the car business right now is a really, really funny business right now to be in, because in my opinion, the supply is finally catching up with the demand. But now, is what we just talked about with higher fuel prices, we've got inflation at a 40-year high, we've got interest rates rising. People just cannot sustain this much longer. The car business is going to probably get hit extremely hard with these changes, because cars are necessities, but new cars are wants, not needs. And when you start having to tighten down your wallet and your belt, the first thing that goes are your wants, not your needs.
Well, and that's especially true. I mean, right now we're going into the midterm elections. We're going to every seat, 435 seats, are up for re-election or election in the United States Congress. And all the Democrats have done are pass $1 trillion packages to go to climate change, to phase out fossil fuels, phase out fossil fuel powered cars by gas. And and then if you look at just what you guys said, the gas prices have risen every day for the past 31 days. In Los Angeles County, the price for a gallon of regular gas is $6.47. Nationwide, right now it's $3.83. If you think about this, when Biden took office, it was $2.34. But not only that, you add to that price, food prices have skyrocketed, climbing 13.5% in August over the year before. That's the highest increase since March of 1979. Just like you said, Shep, interest rates, especially when it applies to mortgages, have spiked. Now you're seeing the housing market, mortgage rates are now at 7% and climbing. That's the first time we've seen mortgage rates that high in over a decade. When Biden took office, the mortgage interest rate was 2.6%. Crime's out of control. Our hunger's out of control. Homelessness is soaring out of control. The border is being crashed by illegal immigration and people bringing fentanyl over that's killing our people. I mean, we've got this liberal CRT in government and in schools. And top it all off, we've got, Russia getting their butts beat by Ukrainians, which is great, but we're funneling billions of dollars worth of weapons to them, and they're saying, hey, we may use a tactical nuclear weapon. I don't see anywhere where we're doing any good in the United States, and we're sticking it to the average Joe citizen, you and me and all of us, except for these rich people that got these electric cars, right at the gas station, right at the kitchen table, right at the grocery store. And I don't see it ever lifting. And what do? They just say, oh, well, it's highly nuanced. It's, there's a lot to this. And meanwhile, Russia makes a deal with Saudi Arabia. And guess what? They cut, as Hermie just said, 2 million barrels a day of oil crude, causing these prices to go up. Where does it stop, Hermie?
It gets really frustrating because when you have these conversations, people immediately get caught up in trying to decide who's to blame and why. And in most cases, they blame or shield blame based on what political party they believe in. But here are the facts. Whether or not you like Donald Trump, when he left office, the United States of America was completely energy independent. We were producing all of our own needs domestically here in the United States. Okay? Prices were reasonable. Gas was reasonable. People were making money, people were thriving, people were getting ahead. Joe Biden, before he even got elected, which is surprisingly enough why people still elected him, while he was running, he told everybody in the United States that I'm going to have an all-out assault on the fossil fuel industry. I'm going to do away with the fossil fuel industry. He told all of us this. So he goes to war with the fossil fuel industry and puts our dependency on these products back over to countries that do not like us to start with. And then we are somehow surprised that these people are dictating the market and causing these undue burdens on families. And now people that live in places like Emporia, Virginia, South Hill, Virginia, southwestern part of the state too, Senator, the middle to lower income families, instead of being able to leave and go up the street and fill their car up with gas, they're having to decide, am I going to fill my car up with gas, or am I going to put a half a tank in my car and spend the rest of my money to try to go to the grocery store? This administration is responsible for this, whether or not the people that are liberals want to believe it or not.
And Senator, let's not forget 31 trillion with a T. I don't even know what comes after trillion, but now we're going to be 31 trillion in debt. And because of the, unpredictable and to fault of nobody's, to blame the last hurricane Ian that came by, now you're going to see building supplies skyrocket once again. Down in that region, you're going to see food sales, price of groceries and all just skyrocket again. You are an elected official on the state level. I realize you're not national, but what's going on? What are we doing? Why is it such a complete disconnect from the three of us sitting here in three different places in Southern Virginia, describing what is going on across America? Where is the disconnect between us three and Washington, D.C.?
Well, I think it's because the people who are in power and control are so worried about hanging on to power and have created that narrative where they tell it to themselves so many times they start believing it that they're living in an alternate universe. I think that's ultimately what's going on here. You got them blaming, when Joe Biden calls out for a woman who's deceased, who he knows is deceased, but of course, because of his addled mind, says, "Where are you out there?" And then what's their spin? Oh, he had her on the top of mind. When they say the gas prices are rising again, and OPEC's cutting fuel or oil output by 2 million barrels a day, the spokesperson for the White House says, "Oh, it's more nuanced than that." When you look at these prices, just like Hermie and I were talking about in a previous podcast, Biden touts that inflation only went up by an inch, when it's 8%, highest since Carter. They live in an alternate universe, and they're trying to convince people because they've had the media touting their narrative. And I think even the media cannot carry that bucket of water anymore. And what you're seeing is a difference in the polling. And when I was looking at some polling today, and it's clearly heading towards the GOP, towards the midterm elections. Voters prefer overwhelmingly at this point in time the GOP, Republicans, over Democrats when it comes to crime, immigration, when it comes to handling the economy. People realize that, Republicans, they may not agree with us with everything, but when it comes to running the country like a business, when it comes to making sure there's more freedoms and less inflation and lower gas prices and energy independence, like Hermie just said, they know Republicans do it best. And I think you're now going to see this happen in all of these elections that are coming up in November. And I think that will continue because that trend is that we've gone too far. The government that's up there right now doesn't care that $11,000 to $14,000 is being taken out of a family of four's pocketbook for a year because of their bad policies. They don't get it. You know why? Because they're going to their country club, at the Army-Navy Country Club in Washington, D.C. every night and sipping $450 bottles of wine through a $300 wine flute. That's what they live on. That's how they're living right now. And they're going to have a rude awakening, but they pass it on to us first. And then they say, well, this is your fault. Because it's more about control of the government and the small amount of people that work in that government rather than the people that give permission for this government to actually rule over them and to guide this country and this nation. And it's getting worse and worse. And you even see the denial even in the weather. You know, Shep, you just mentioned Hurricane Ian, which was devastating to Florida. I think Governor DeSantis has been unbelievable in his response, and
Awesome.
it's pissing off the Democrats because they wanted him to fail. Now they're blaming Hurricane Ian on climate change. Listen to CNN right here when they're trying to blame, I think it's Don Lemon, is it not here in this clip, trying to get someone who's a weather person to say, isn't this hurricane caused by all you gas guzzlers, you Hermie Sadler gas sellers who don't care about climate change? Here's Don Lemon, and listen to this great response.
Can you tell us what this is and what effect climate change has on this phenomenon?
Well, we can come back and talk about climate change at a later time. I want to focus on the here and now. We think the rapid intensification is probably almost done. There could be a little bit more intensification as it's still over the warm waters of the eastern Gulf of Mexico, but I don't think we're going to get any more rapid intensification. If you look here, you can actually see, pretty interesting for your viewers, you can actually see a second eye wall forming around the inner eye wall, and that's basically the second eye wall has overtaken the original eye wall, and that should arrest development.
So listen, I'm just trying to get that. You said you want to talk about climate change, but what effect does climate change have on this phenomenon that is happening now? Because it seems these storms are intensifying. That's the question here.
I don't think you can link climate change to any one event.
Okay.
On the whole, on the cumulative, climate change may be making storms worse, but to link it to any one event, I would caution against that.
Okay. Well, listen, I grew up there, and these storms are intensifying. Something is causing them to intensify. So this storm is just
Don Lemon,
it's
the
a massive one.
meteorologist.
Its
I grew
effects
there.
are also being
Grew up
felt
there.
In the southern part of Florida. What about the areas that may not be taking a direct hit or experiencing the storm surge like on the West Coast? How much
right
will
there.
the rest...
Now, what you basically have is, what you have there right there is because Don Lemon grew up in Florida, he knows. And this hurricane is caused by all you gas-guzzling, carbon dioxide breathing animals, cow-eating people who fly around in private jets. Oh, wait, we do that. We liberals do that. I mean, can you believe that? And it goes even further, gentlemen. Here's The View. Here's Joy Behar, who we love so much. She's talking about how actually what happened at the hurricane not only is climate change, but it was also created, all this damage and all this mayhem was created by Ron DeSantis, and he is responsible for what happened to Floridians.
This is the quote from Governor DeSantis about climate change. Quote, I am not in the pews of the church of the global warming leftists. This is what he thinks about climate change. And now his state is getting hit with one of the worst hurricanes that they will ever see.
Perhaps he...
This is...
So it's DeSantis and our faults, not the people that believe in climate change. But, ladies and gentlemen, everyday Americans standing up for Ron DeSantis and how he's handling the crisis. The news was sitting there saying, oh, this is a tragedy, and Ron DeSantis is not bringing gas to the areas that need it most, and they're not responding like they should be, even though Kamala Harris, the vice president, said when the federal government is going to dole out assistance down there in Florida to victims, it's going to be based on equity. That is, persons of color will receive benefits first, and it will be, and which I think is racist, and it will be doled out that way rather than to all Americans, all Floridians, regardless of the race, color, or creed. And here's what we had here. Here's a guy from Florida who said when the press came up and said, oh, you're doing without gas, you're doing without food or ice. This was his response to the reporter.
That shit about DeSantis, but that gas is here in Arcadia. Now, I don't know about the rest of y'all, but it's here in Arcadia. So y'all know who we vote for. I don't know about the rest of you motherfuckers. I'm voting for DeSantis. And I'm a Democrat. So y'all can call it what the fuck you want. We got children out here. Okay, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry.
Calling it like it is, and the press doesn't like the narrative. DeSantis is doing a great job. Look, it's a devastating hurricane. We're thinking about all the families that have been harmed by this, those that have lost their lives. Nature is, I think Hermie Sadler said to me one time, maybe even said it on this podcast, nature is undefeated. Mother Nature is always undefeated. And I don't think these hurricanes have gotten any worse because of climate change or anything else. And quite frankly, we have seen times, especially like in Louisiana and New Orleans, with a Democrat-controlled government there, where they botched the rescue efforts and botched the care of their citizens. Ron DeSantis has been on top of this. They're even blaming it. How did you, the hurricane made a turn over Florida and went out to the Atlantic. How did you not prepare for that? Well, how's he going to know that stuff? But I tell you what, they've been bringing medical supplies, restoring power, rescuing people, making sure there's gas in Arcadia, and doing the right thing. So hats off to Governor DeSantis on how he's handled this hurricane. Hermie, what are your thoughts? I mean, we're watching this, of course, safely miles away, but I think the reaction from DeSantis makes him a real, not only good governor, good guy, and he stands up to this press's BS, but I think he could be president someday.
Here is the recurring theme to all those bits we just listened to, and it's really, really sad, and that is the left is more concerned about pushing the narrative that they want people to believe than they are telling people the truth and giving them the best opportunity to prepare or survive or thrive moving forward. They're more interested in, if the narrative is not there, like Don Lemon, let's inject the narrative into the story. And I say this all the time, when I go to, start to have, political conversations with people that are not always pleasant, especially people of color and middle to lower income people that I talk to in my daily life and my business. And when it gets right down to it, when I say, well, why do you keep voting Democrat? 9 times out of 10, they cannot tell you why. It's because I'm supposed to, or my family says I'm supposed to. And the Democrats have a history of taking advantage of people by creating these narratives and saying these same things over and over again, and in my view, taking advantage of people that maybe don't in every case, understand the whole situation the way they should. And I think it's sad. I think it's appalling. The good news is, Shep and Senator, more and more people, including the guy that was talking about DeSantis in that clip, more and more people are starting to pay attention and educate themselves on really just what is going on. And I just hope this November and next November that more people vote accordingly.
Well, Hermie, let's just call it like it is. And you sugarcoated it a little bit compared to what I'm getting ready to say. This is like pissing in my cup and tell me to drink beer. To me, it's about the equivalent of that. And I think that what's educating these people is their pocketbook and the emptiness of their pocketbook. I think when you can't put food on your family's table, when you can't buy gas to get to that job, when you can't properly clothe your family and your kids because you don't have the money to do so because of these policies, I think that's what's educating them politically faster than anything else is their wallet. That's just my take on it.
And I just hope, my advice is, regardless of what your beliefs are politically or otherwise, just take the time to educate yourself, learn what's going on yourself. Don't rely on a politician or somebody on the news or your friend, your cousin, your uncle. Educate yourself and quite simply look at your situation and say, am I better off now than I was 2 years ago? Do I feel better about the future than I did 2 years ago for my family and economically and otherwise? And make your own decisions and vote accordingly. That's what I encourage people to do.
And Senator, one thing I'm going to agree with Joe Biden on, I'm going to agree with him on this. This is Trump's fault because this started the first debate when Trump, in my opinion, failed miserably at the first. How in the hell do you let Joe Biden out debate anybody? And, in my opinion, that's where Trump, hit the icy slopes that night. And like Hermie said, Biden told us, he told the American people what he was going to do if he were elected. We were, in my opinion, dumb enough to elect him. We challenged him to prove what he said, and so far he's done it. And he's right. It's all Trump's fault for that miserable debate performance he had on their very first debate.
Well, there are a lot of factors that had the outcome of the election go Biden's way. I could go chapter and verse and give you 100 different reasons of what influenced the outcomes, whether it be from drop boxes to something else nefarious, or even what you just said there. Certainly, the debates weren't the best, but I think, a lot of people had their minds made up. And I don't know that a debate ever changes anybody's mind in politics, but they find it to be a necessary event to occur during the political process of elections. But let me tell you one thing, and I think you both are right. Quite frankly, what we're seeing is elitism. Republican Party is the man of the people party. We're for the worker, the everyday person. It wasn't always that way. It always seemed like we were defending big business. But if you look at the Democrats, the liberal elites, the educated college and university elites, they're the ones defending big businesses and allowing big businesses to enter into government and take away your freedoms, like your First Amendment right, freedom of speech. They're the ones that are pushing climate change, and big businesses are the ones reacting to them. And actually for CRT, critical race theory, they're the ones, it's the elites, the liberal elites that want you to drive electric cars and stop using gas-powered cars, but then get into their Gulfstream jets and fly overhead and dump the most pollutants into the atmosphere that harm the very things that they're trying to fix. It's the elites that push transgenderism into our schools and are allowing teachers to try to tell second graders how to be objectified, how to refer to themselves sexually or even into their gender, and telling them that big lie. It's the liberal elites that are trying to get between the child and the parent and dictate how that child is run, because that's what the government wants. It's the liberal elites that are the ones pushing a divisive narrative that says you are the oppressor and you are the oppressed, putting labels on people. And quite frankly, if you need any more evidence of that, look no further than the liberal elites and Nancy Pelosi when it comes to the Latino community. Right now, what you're seeing is the Latino community is swinging hard to the right by 30 to 35%. Our Latin community, are those in the community that can vote, are voting Republican. They're switching their votes. It's not that given that the Democrats figured will flood the zone with illegal immigrants. They'll get the right to vote and they'll vote Democrat. Most of them are conservative, and they're also running away from countries that the liberal elites in the universities and in government are trying to create here in the United States. And now the liberal elites are finally waking up. The universities, remember, they were trying to push this phraseology called, instead of a Latino or Latina, they were changing now that, which has been the traditional way of identifying Latino being a male person of Hispanic descent, Latina being female person of Hispanic descent. Then they changed it to Latinx instead of Latino and Latina, because they said it was more inclusive. In fact, they said the term Latinx was a solution from feminist and queer Spanish speakers to boost inclusivity within the male-dominated Spanish language. And the Latino and Latina community absolutely rejected that. So you know what the liberal elites in the professorial realm of universities and colleges decided to do? Oh, okay. Well, we're getting hammered on that. We're going to change it now. It's Latine, Latine. That'll be more acceptable, and that'll be inclusive for all the gay Spanish speakers and transgender Spanish speakers. Well, quite frankly, that just demonstrates how hypocritical they are, but how they really think about Hispanics and even the illegal aliens that they're allowing across the border was summarized by our horrible Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, who said this.
We have a shortage of workers in our country, and you see even in Florida, some of the farmers and the growers saying, why are you shipping these immigrants up north? We need them to pick the crops.
Can you believe that? She admitted it. That's what they're good for. Cheap labor. Cheap labor. Pick the crops. Remember what we were talking about when we were discussing why Martha's Vineyard, they got rid of them with less than 48 hours after they were dropped on their doorstep, because the only way they were going to let them in their backyard is if they had a weed whacker in their hands. And I'm not talking Manscaped, ladies and gentlemen. I am talking about Either they're going to mow their lawn, but they can't live in their neighborhoods. And now Nancy Pelosi says what she really feels, what the elites, the liberal elites feel about the Latin community that has emigrated here legally, that has taken a position. Your job, we need you to pick the crops. I mean, that's racism. And that's why our country is going to crap right now. And because we're allowing liberal elites, racist liberal elites, who then turn and say, MAGA Republicans are ruining the Constitution, are bad people. But it's them. It's them. It's them. We want everybody to have an equal chance. They want power, and they don't care if they ruin the country's economy and the people who live within it.
Getting back to Nancy Pelosi, sometimes they screw up and say the quiet stuff out loud. Again, I hope people are paying attention. And my tip for this whole segment, my word of advice today is on all these issues, politically speaking, is educate yourself. Take on that responsibility of actually understanding and learning what's going on, what these agendas are, why they're in place, how they're impacting your family, and don't rely on your cousin, your uncle, your brother, your friend, people at church, people at work. Make your own decisions based on the reality of your situation. And if you do, you can be confident that you're going to make the right decision when you come to the ballot box, because voting this November and next November is the only way that we're going to be able to fix all these problems.
And Senator, you talk about the liberal elitism hypocrisy. Just look at the immigrants that are coming across the border in the Texas region. You don't see these sanctuary cities stepping up to accept these illegal immigrants. You don't see AOC out in her district in New York politicking for those buses to land on her doorstep and drop these illegal immigrants off. You don't see that. Oh, no.
No, and that's, and here we go. So hopefully, America, wake up. It's time to wake up. We can say enough, and quite frankly, we can voice our opinion at the ballot box. But then for those that get elected, if they're Republican, we take over the House and Senate, you still got a veto pen in the Democrat who sits in the White House. We can't give up. We got to keep pushing forward. We can't. It's going to be a tough couple of years. I think recession is on its way if it's not already here, and it may be more impactful than we've seen in previous recessions. It always seems funny how we always go into recession. During Clinton, during Obama. Here we are with Biden, and I want to get back to peace and prosperity and freedom and liberty for everybody. But I think you're going to see a real shock and a culture change in terms of how people think, and especially at the ballot box. So that's my Leaning Right moment, sponsored by Charlie's Waterfront Cafe in beautiful Farmville, Virginia. Gentlemen, we're going to talk about Turning Left moment, but before we get to that, Hermie, I just want to talk about who our interview is. It is a Leaning Right interview with a delegate who I respect very greatly from the Virginia Beach area, Glen Davis. He's going to go over with everybody here listening here today exactly how the budget amendments was snuck into the budget that tried to ban those skill games that is the subject matter of our lawsuit. For those that are listening for the first time, we're embroiled in a lawsuit against the Commonwealth of Virginia that's trying to keep, through the hand of the casinos, small businesses in Virginia out of the gaming industry, which is emerging after the legislature took a different tack and started approving gambling and gaming in the Commonwealth of Virginia after banning it for so long. And we fought the law that they wrote, SB Senate Bill 971. We got an injunction which allowed certain games, skill games, not games of chance, not video games of chance, to be turned back on. We won that injunction. We're going to trial November 2nd. We've been talking about it a lot. We don't need to rehash everything here today. What did the legislature do? In the 11th hour, in a smoky back room with 3 people involved, they snuck budget language, changing the criminal code of Virginia, making it a crime to operate a skill game, and they made it permanent in a budget bill, which only has an impact for 2 years. And so what we have now coming up in the interview after our Turning Left moment is actually a delegate who's going to go over chapter and verse why this was unconstitutional, why it was wrong, why it went against everything that we think about in an American legislative process, and why we need to change how we do things because it's not right and it ignores the will of the people. And so we'll have Delegate Glen Davis coming on after the break, but now we're going to be turning left. Yeah,
and I'll say before we get to the turning left, Bill, that I do not like politics, and I do not like many politicians, but I do like Glen Davis, and the people in Virginia Beach are lucky to have somebody like Glen Davis that is willing to speak out, step up, and speak out for what we're speaking out for, Bill, and that's nothing more than fair government for everybody. That's really what it's about, being fair to everybody.
That's exactly right, and I think
Hermie,
he does it in a great way. And you need more politicians like him because he's honest, he's open, he's like you. He's going to fight for what he believes is right, do the right things, never lie to the people that he represents.
And I was going to just say, Senator, I also like his fight for the education here in the state of Virginia. He's chairman of the House of the Education Committee, and he has done some great things, including helping us get a brand new state-of-the-art high school open right here in Mecklenburg County. He came down to our ribbon cutting. I did not have the pleasure of shaking his hand that day, but I did have the honor of in appreciating him coming down for that. So,
and just think, from now on, Shep, before we get to the turning left, now when some of our special guests and listeners and viewers see you at a public event, they're going to say, "Oh, there's the Manscaped guy from Leaning Right and Turning Left with Sadler and the Senator, Shep Mouse."
Shep Mouse. Shep Mouse and his doodads. Right. Cleanly shorn doodads.
We're not doing that again, Senator. We've got enough of that.
Hey, next week. Wait a minute, Hermie. Next week, I want everybody to come back to this, and I want to see how many euphemisms or nicknames you can give for your two buddies down there. All right, and we'll just have a dick off. We can see how long
sick.
we can.
You're sick.
I'm not sick. I think it's funny.
The podcast is officially off the tracks, ladies and gentlemen.
Put us back on the track.
Turning left moment, as always. Can you mute his mic, Shep? Can you mute his mic from South Hill? Okay. Turning left moment is sponsored, as always, by Laura Stanley and Vista Installation. She's been running a successful window and door installation company, and God only knows how, babysitting one particular trial attorney and state senator from Franklin County for over 12 years, and God bless her.
Yeah, God bless her, indeed.
She deserves a plaque.
Before we get to a little NASCAR talk, Bill, the Sadler Stanley racing team gets back on track this weekend. We got 2 cars on the track. Jonathan Brown, our normal driver, we got to get him into the top 3 in points somehow over the next 2 races to give him a shot at the championship in the season finale down at Motor Mile. We've also got, one of the things that you and I have talked about. Chad, get your mug out of the picture there. One of the things you and I talked about early on was given opportunities, and you know how important the karting industry is to me. It's where me and my brother started, but we're also given, hopefully the third time will be a charm if Mother Nature will cooperate, Jonathan Cash, well-known kart racer and late model stock car racer from the Mid-Atlantic region. He'll be driving our second car at Hickory this Saturday night. We'll have 2 cars on track, and with the Jonathan Cash car, number 39, we've got a list of people that are going to be matching the purse that that car earns at Hickory on Saturday night, and matching those funds and donating them to the family of Chris Beasley, who is the promoter and owner at Capital City Speedway that passed away back in August. And so we want to thank Pace-O-Matic. We want to thank Sadler Stanley Racing, PSR, everybody involved for that opportunity to put 2 cars on the track this weekend, and to give Jonathan Cash an opportunity so I can show people that are in the karting industry, if you do things the right way and can get the job done, you may have a shot to one day step up and drive an open wheel modified for Sadler Stanley Racing. And speaking of my sponsor, Vista Installations, Laura Stanley, she's got a big weekend planned with some of her partners and sponsors down at Hickory too, Senator, isn't that correct?
That is exactly right. She's going to have about 75 people that work for her and also work for Lowe's. Some Lowe's executives are coming to Hickory to watch the Smart Series race. There's going to be a big-time party there. It should be a lot of fun, and especially for those employees that she's showing appreciation of, but also Lowe's, which, of course, her company does business with. And we're trying to get them also interested in short-track racing and certainly open-wheel modified. So it's going to be a big event, and you, as their spokesperson, since they're your sponsor, you've got a lot of shaking hands to do out there on Saturday. So you better be ready. You're going to be ready.
I'm looking forward to coming to Hickory. I hadn't been to Hickory since the mid-1990s, and one of my favorite racetracks. I finished second in Busch Grand National Series race there 3 damn times. My boys in the shop reminded me about that earlier today. 3 bridesmaids finishes at that track. But look, Hickory has a lot of history. It's a great short track. You think about Jack Ingram, Harry Gant, Sam Ard, all these drivers that grew up cutting their teeth in and around Hickory Motor Speedway. It's going to be a fun night, and we're hoping that Jonathan Cash has a good run, and we raise a lot of money for Chris Beasley. And we need Jonathan Brown to have a couple really solid races, because when we get to Motor Mile for the Smart Series Championship, any driver that's in the top 3 in points has a shot to win the championship. So that's what we've got to get Jonathan to over these next couple weeks.
And that's pretty amazing that you built a race team. We've built a race team, but you've been leading it, of course, because I do this podcast, and you see the results for that. That from the very beginning, from the ground up, we built this team with something in mind. We wanted to be competitive, we wanted to win, and we wanted to have fun. I think we're accomplishing all of that, and we wanted to actually create another platform for our sponsor and for what we're doing for small businesses and the fight that we're taking on to the Commonwealth of Virginia, and also to really highlight the short tracks in the rural areas that depend so much on these short tracks, and the small businesses that might have skill games in them for those kind of revenues. And man, here we are. What are we in? 3rd place, 4th place? Are we in what place are we in?
I think we're 4th. We got some work to do the next 2 races to get to the top 3.
Okay. But I mean, that's pretty darn good for the first time out. And I think, you and I have been planning already. We may have some big announcements sometime in the future. We're working hard to make year 2 even better. Isn't that right, Herm?
Yeah, we got a lot going on, some good news, some good things happening, and we'll announce those in the coming weeks. And not only we got some Smart Series races coming up, but we've got, the NASCAR Wheeling Tour race coming up at Martinsville, October the 27th on a Thursday night. We're going to do that in conjunction with a big event that you've got going on there at that racetrack, Senator, close to your home district that you represent.
That's right.
There. And so a lot of fans and fellow legislators and people that you work with for the fine folks in Franklin County. We'll hope to have a big crowd come out to join us on Thursday night at Martinsville Speedway. Want to talk a little bit about, of course, Chase Elliott won at Talladega, win number 5 on the season, but the big story out of NASCAR the last couple of weeks has been these drivers suffering these concussions. And, Kurt Busch is already out for the year. Alex Bowman is just announced, yesterday that he'll miss his 2nd consecutive race this weekend at the Roval in Charlotte with a concussion. The talk is now that NASCAR really needs to look at the next-gen car and look at the possibility of redesigning the rear bumper area of these cars. It's much too rigid, doesn't take enough of the impact, doesn't absorb enough of the energy, and it's becoming a theme. And when you start getting drivers hurt, especially in the case of Alex Bowman, if you looked at the accident that hurt him at Texas, he barely bumped the back of the car against the wall, barely even knocked the paint off the back bumper of the car, and here he is with some serious concussion issues, and that's a red flag for NASCAR.
Well, I mean, isn't there? But when you think about that, that's the head going backwards. I thought they're like locked in with a Hans device and that headrest, which whips around the whole. Well,
they're hitting their head on the seat, which is real close to the helmet. It's not like the Hans device prevents your head from moving forward at an impact. What Dale Earnhardt died from was a basal skull fracture. So the Hans devices and those things prevent the sudden move of the head forward. These concussions are caused by just, your head in some case, your helmet rests against the headrest, or maybe there's a 1/2 inch to 1 inch gap. And there's so much, these cars are so rigid and such a quick impact, it's shaking these guys around the headrest in the cars and causing some problems. And if you notice the difference, those that watch closely can, the last cars that we had, when you bagged them into the wall, I mean, you would basically knock the back end of the car off. It would compress into and under the fuel cell, and it would absorb a lot of that energy. These cars are so rigid, the cars are not folding up like they used to, but it's putting all that energy into the cockpit against the driver. So I'm anxious to see how accelerated NASCAR can look at some of these problems they're having and try to come up with some resolution to this, because the drivers are now starting to speak out, and the NASCAR drivers have a record now of drivers getting injured, and so NASCAR is going to have to react maybe sooner than they had anticipated.
Well, I mean, yeah, they used to before this next gen variety. I mean, it looked like tinfoil was on the back. It would just crumple up, and of course, sometimes with that damage, it kind of ruins your day when you have that. And so, how do they fix this? I mean, how do you get in between? Because, like you mentioned, you got the fuel cell back there. That's a very vulnerable spot. We've seen a lot of fires going on. Usually, they're coming in the front of the engine. We saw that fire in the truck series where the guy hopped out while the car was still moving. Then it hit the wall. I mean, I almost thought he was going to get it just from trying to get out of the car. I mean, how do they fix the back end? We talked about how Ryan Newman said he had problems as an engineer with how they built the car. How do you fix the back end so we're not having these kind of mistakes?
NASCAR is a little bit of a box now, Bill, because they've had some wrecks, they've had some injuries, the drivers are putting pressure on them, and now they're kind of saying, well, we figured we might have had a problem, or we know we got a problem. Then the question becomes, how did NASCAR ever allow this car to be put into competition with this type of engineering into the car? So how to fix it, I don't know. There's a lot of smart people at NASCAR. I trust that they will work on it and get it fixed. They have to get it fixed quickly, because you get drivers getting hurt every week. That's safety is always will be first. So they have to figure out how to accomplish what they need to do on the back end of these cars. And I hope, for the sake of the sport, because there's been so many positives with this car from a competition standpoint.
Right.
But a couple black eyes because of driver injuries wipes out all that goodwill. So NASCAR has to get it fixed, and they have to get it fixed now. So it'll be interesting to see how they navigate the process of trying to fix the car, take the driver's input, while also doing things the way NASCAR does, which is never admit they're wrong.
That there was a problem.
They have a lot of things to navigate at one time.
Now, when you say now, though, are you thinking they're going to fix this before the end of the season, or has this got to be back to the drawing board?
No way they can fix it before the end of the season.
Okay.
I think you'll see some testing, some more crash testing and otherwise, but we've only got a handful of races left. I really can't see any meaningful change that they can come up with and ask all the team owners to update the cars in time for the last 5 races. If they can, more power to them. It's never too early to do something in the spirit of safety, but I just can't see how that can happen between now and Homestead.
Well, I mean, could you now? Okay,
Phoenix.
Maybe can't do anything to the back of the car, but could you do anything to the headrest? I mean, that seems like an easy fix. Like increase the padding, lessen the inches.
I personally don't know. I don't know.
Lessen the inches between the helmet and the pad. I mean,
well, you're not going to want to. You can't drive a race car if you've got no mobility with your head. I mean, the racetracks are banked. Places like Talladega or Bristol. I mean, there's a lot of banking. I don't know how you could drive with your head basically in a brace that you could not move your head. I don't know how you see out of the side view mirror, look up to look out of the rear view mirror. I don't see how that would be a possibility. But where we stand right now, NASCAR has finally had to admit they've got a problem and they've got to fix it. But they've got a lot of components and a lot of going back to Manscaped, a lot of balls to juggle at one time to try to get it fixed.
He finally said it, Shep. He finally said it. He said balls. But
well,
yeah,
look, I got a question. I know Hermie mentioned you've got some big announcements maybe coming up soon, but can you make an announcement on this weekend? Can you announce if the new improved SLG RV will be at Hickory, and will the Honey Wagon be making an appearance at Hickory? That's what I think the fans really want to know about.
Shep is referring, if you listen to our earlier podcasts, I bought a Class C motor coach. It was hotter than Blue Blazes. It had 1 air conditioning unit, not 2. And it was kind of small, and I had 3 kids in there, and I felt like I was in a small submarine with a bunch of sweaty little people. So I immediately decided for myself that I was going to buy a Class A. So I traded in for a Class A motor coach, 30.5 foot. Kind of looked like Hermie's, but 2023 Thor Ace. Took it out for a week, and we took it to a race at Carteret. It worked wonderfully. We loved it. We will be bringing it to Hickory, and it's got a little bit of a bigger tank for gray and black water, but we will be more careful. See, it's going to be cooler, so we're not going to be drinking as much water. So we're hopeful that the honey wagon will not have to make an appearance. So yes and no. And if it does, we're in trouble. So we're having a big party and there's going to be 70 people out there. I'm locking the door to the camper. So everybody's going to have to whiz either at the porta potty or outside.
Well, look, I want to encourage everybody to stand by and listen to our interview coming up with Delegate Glen Davis. Again, I think people will enjoy the interview. You'll learn a lot more about Delegate Davis and what motivates him and what is motivating him as he looks towards the next steps of his political future. And I think if you're listening to this podcast and you're a fan of small business, you'll like what you hear from Glen Davis. We need more people like him fighting in the General Assembly, that's for sure. So Glen Davis coming up. Anything else you want to get here before we head to the interview, Senator or Shep?
Yeah, I just want to stay just on your turning left moment. What do you make of the playoffs now? I mean, you've got Alex Bowman who was in it. You've had Kurt Busch who was in it. And again, both of them out with concussive syndrome, post-concussive syndromes. The win by finally a playoff driver occurs at Talladega. I thought the racing was great and it was classic to watch. It's 2x2. It wasn't 3 wide and all that, but I thought it was classic and it didn't end on a wreck. Where are we now? Who's got the best chance? If you had a good look into your crystal ball, Hermie Sadler, who has the best chance of winning?
Eastern Stanley time again.
Eastern Stanley time. I've been trying to tell him for 10 minutes I got to go to an event that he helped me plan, but he's going to throw another question at me. Anyway, I have no idea. I'm going to go with Chase Elliott to give you a short answer. He's got a big fan base, and I encourage all Chase Elliott fans to go to manscaped.com, use the code Sadler to get 20% off to get your balls ready for fall.
And Hermie,
now can we go?
What's the angle in the turns? What degree angle is in the turns in Talladega?
All right, Shep, you got it from here. I appreciate all the listeners tuning in. This is Leaning Right and Turning Left with Sadler and the Senator. And I really do, now more than ever, appreciate Pace-O-Matic.
And, hey, give Leon Benjamin a hi for me. He's appearing at Faux Show. He's running for Congress. Go out there and support Leon Benjamin. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Virginia State Senator Bill Stanley, and I'm leaning right.
And I'm Hermie Sadler, and I'm turning left. And Shep, what are you doing?
I am using Manscaped and keeping my balls clean for the fall.
Lord have mercy. What a way to end the show. Can't get any better than that. Thank everybody for listening. Tune in every week. Give us a 5-star rating on Spotify, iTunes, anywhere you find podcasts. We really appreciate your support, and we'll see you again next week.
God bless you.
Hi, folks. This is Hermie Sadler. Thanks for listening to our all-new podcast, Leaning Right and Turning Left with Sadler and the Senator. I hope you are enjoying the show as much as Senator Stanley and I enjoy bringing it to you. Whether you're a family traveling together or a truck driver hauling freight up and down the highway, I hope you will take the time to visit one of our Sadler Travel Plaza locations in Virginia and North Carolina. Sadler Travel Plaza locations are licensed dealer locations for Pilot Travel Centers, and we also carry Shell Motiva petroleum products for our four-wheel friends. We pride ourselves on providing one-stop shopping for service, food, and entertainment. Our food options include Five Guys Burgers and Fries, Quiznos, Dairy Queen, Hermie Sadler's Faux Show Bar and Grill, Victory Lane Restaurant, Hunt Brothers Pizza, Dunkin' Donuts, and much, much more. Our locations include Sadler Travel Plaza in South Hill, located off I-85 at Exit 12. The Sadler Travel Plaza of Emporia, which is conveniently located on Exit 11B off I-95, and Sadler Travel Plaza on Highway 58 in Suffolk. We also have our North Carolina location, Sadler Travel Plaza in Dunn, North Carolina. That's Exit 75 off I-95. We appreciate all of our customers. And Bill and I appreciate you listening to Leaning Right and Turning Left with Sadler and the Senator, powered by Pace-O-Matic.
Hey, this is Bill Stanley, Hermie Sadler's sidekick on this podcast. When I'm not in Richmond at the Capitol or doing this podcast, my real job for the past 27 years is as a trial attorney with the Stanley Law Group. Here at the Stanley Law Group, we represent our clients in every courthouse in the Commonwealth. No problem is too small for us to solve. No case is too big for us to win. Whether it's criminal charges, traffic offenses, civil disputes, litigation matters of any sort, we handle it all. We make sure that we treat every client like family because they are to us. Your problem is our problem. Your success is our success because we hate to lose more than we love to win. And believe me, we win a lot. Don't believe me? Go ask Hermie. I'm his favorite lawyer, and he hates lawyers. So give us a call at 540-721-6028 and let us help you. Or visit our website at www.vastanleylawgroup.com. That's www.vastanleylawgroup.com. At the Stanley Law Group, we'll make sure we're the lawyers that you swear by and not at. And we're back. I'm Virginia State Senator Bill Stanley, and I'm leaning right.
I'm former NASCAR driver and Fox Sports analyst Hermie Sadler, and I'm turning left, leaning right and turning left with Sadler and the Senator, powered by Pacematic. And we've got a couple guests with us again on this podcast. Mr. Moss, you want to give us your introduction, and then
should we put the introduction back on there? Do we still have that introduction for him? Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, please listen in.
You have an incoming call from
Shep Moss,
an inmate at the Mecklenburg County Correctional Facility. To accept this call, please press 1.
Press 2. Don't accept
What button did you press?
Two.
Oh,
Shep Moss, the controversial town councilman of South Heel, the man who's fighting the old guard, Shep Moss, even if he has to do it in orange shower shoes and jammies.
Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes.
Welcome back, Shep. And we have a great guest. You know, Hermie likes to bring a lot of his top tier guests, but I'm bringing the top tier guest this time. I mean, this is better than Michael Waltrip. This is better than Kenny Wallace.
Wait a minute.
This is right up there with George Allen.
even better than Dale Earnhardt Jr.?
Okay, that's pretty good. All
right, better than Tyler Hansbrough, Mickey James,
yes,
Jeff Jarrett,
yes.
Brian J. I mean,
no, I'm not going to say Double J. He's our boss. This is Glen Ray Davis Jr., a delegate here in the General Assembly of Virginia. We are, of course, recording high atop the skyscraper, the Stanley Law Group skyscraper, in the Stanley Law Group conference room studio overlooking the beautiful capital of Richmond, capital of the Commonwealth, Richmond, Virginia. And we've got one of those movers and shakers that actually makes a difference. He takes the title seriously. He takes the job seriously, and he gets things done, not just for his area in Virginia Beach, which we're going to talk about, but for all of Virginia. And he's been a real warrior over there in the House of Delegates, been a real fighter for those that are less advantaged, that are disadvantaged, for school modernization, for so many issues. I mean, we'll talk about the things we've worked on together. But I want to welcome Glen Ray Davis Jr., delegate from Virginia Beach, to the program. Welcome,
Glenn.
All right.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. And,
sir.
You know, just so you know, my lap times at Charlotte were not that much slower than the other guys. Only by about a minute or so.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, hey,
They were taping you with the hourglass?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Hey, you know,
I didn't hit the wall though. So, you know.
We have
You're thinking what I'm thinking.
We have an open wheel modified team. Maybe you should get in and drive the car. What do you think, Hermie, in one of our races?
I think you should get right in and go.
Wow, that's the first one you've agreed to.
I will have to show you my video from VIR before you offer me that. So
Okay.
Well, VIR is tough. You turn left and right. Our car, if things are going well, we're just turning left.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
If you turn right in our car, the next thing you'll be hearing is, "Are you all right?" That means you bagged it into the fence. But Glenn, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. As you probably know, we talk a little bit of racing. We talk a little bit of politics, law, everything in between, professional wrestling. I have a lot of friends in that industry. We talk about things like that. But, Bill, as always, in our private conversations, mentioned how good it has been to have someone like you standing up for what's right, fighting for what's right, fighting for the people, and using the government to work for the people in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So for that, as a person raising a family and operating small businesses in the Commonwealth of Virginia, thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate it. Look, I was that serial entrepreneur growing up. I started my company at the age of 26 after I lost my job 6 weeks before Christmas in 1999. So I know what it's like to start a company. I know how many times entrepreneurs tell their business partners, we're not going to make payroll next period. Somehow everything works in. You rob Peter to pay Paul. You get through and you make it work. And we need to make sure that Virginia stays that state that continues to help those entrepreneurs develop those next big companies and maintains that level playing field, which unfortunately I think we're starting to go down a little bit of the wrong direction on.
I know I feel this way. Bill and I had this conversation. Shep in South Hill, Mecklenburg County, is a small business owner. The small businesses, despite what people say and the narratives they follow, small businesses are the backbone of the economies of the Commonwealth of Virginia, especially in areas that, like Bill represents and that I live in, and certainly down your part of the country as well. And so I think it's important. And that's one of the reasons why we started this podcast. And also one of the reasons why we started our race team is to keep our message out front, keep a platform going, give us something to talk about, and remind people that, this thing really kicked off with Bill and I last year at Motor Mile Speedway. Bill actually sponsored the race through his law practice, and it was the Stanley Law Group Protects Small Business 100 at Motor Mile Speedway. And so we've, since that time, and since we sued the governor, we've been using this as a crusade.
Hold on, and one.
Yeah. We've been using this to really just make sure we keep the message, how important small businesses are, and we need to make sure we keep in mind those people and the people that operate those businesses and their families and employees and all that. Sometimes they get lost in the debate or lost in the shuffle or whatever. So this podcast really has given us a platform to keep that out front and keep it on the tip of everybody's mind.
And, you started off in small business, just as you said. Talk a little bit, especially to our audience that's very interested in politics and should be in Virginia politics. Before you got into politics, where did you make your mark? What did you start doing?
So, actually, it's kind of interesting. So right out of high school, my first job in politics was Frank Wagner's 1991 campaign. So I'd always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but back then I also wanted to be in politics, and I got introduced to Frank by a substitute teacher.
Oh, wow.
So that's, I worked on his campaign back in 91. As you know, he won, and that's when we started taking back Virginia Beach.
That's right.
I was his aide back in the 93 session, went back to George Mason, and had the opportunity to be Bob McDonnell's aide back in the 95 session when his aide went to go open the Attorney General's office in Virginia Beach. So I had a little bit of opportunity to be involved in politics before I really got my business feet underneath me. But getting involved in business, I always wanted to be the entrepreneur. I wanted to be responsible for my future. I learned at an early age that sometimes you can do a great job, but if someone you're working for makes a mistake, you're at the whim. And I always wanted to be responsible for if I should make my own failures and be responsible for them and be able to build a team so we all can succeed, right? And that's why people succeed, is because of the team. So right. I've always been after that, and that's what it's allowed me to do.
Well, what business did you dive into in that with that entrepreneurial spirit that you had?
So telecommunications. So like I mentioned, I really did lose my job 6 weeks before Christmas. I knew enough about telecom to be dangerous. Kind of self-taught. And so I didn't tell my parents I lost my job till New Year's. It was kind of a good news, bad news, good news or bad news. I lost my job. Good news, I started a company, don't have to move back in yet. Thankfully, yet never came. 7 years later, we were one of the 100 fastest growing IT companies in the U.S. at Corning Magazine.
Wow.
But it was all about starting that company, in that one-bedroom apartment where during the day you're out knocking doors trying to get sales, because every entrepreneur is a salesperson, and in the evening doing what you have to do to prepare proposals and all the back-end stuff. And so I ended up in telecom. Just honestly, it's the only thing I knew enough of that I could even think about doing it. And I had to be able to pay the bills. I had my last 2-week paycheck, and that's all I had.
And are you still doing that today, or did you?
I just sold the equity in that company December of last year. So it was kind of a bittersweet to have that company since I was 26. But it was definitely nice to be able to put together a nice exit on the backside.
Glen Davis, are you retired?
No,
you're way too young to be retired.
I'm like you. I don't think I ever could be retired, right?
Very true. Very true. Well, now you've outlined a little bit about your intro into politics, working for politicians who were elected, and some really good ones there. Even Frank Wagner. Frank was a character in the Senate for so many years. He taught me a lot. I'm sure he taught you a lot.
He did.
He taught me a lot what not to do too. But he was really, really one of a kind, and really a guy that was very focused on making sure that he was accomplishing things, and could work across the aisle, but at the same time, really would stand on principle and really helped us a lot. But you were elected to the Rose Hall
City Council back in 2000 and 2008.
Was that your first elected position?
It was. It was first time I was elected. I actually lost a city council race 2 years prior by less than 1%, and then came back and beat a 28-year incumbent that year.
Okay, so Shep Moss is a town councilman. He's fighting the good fight, especially against the old guard. What kind of perspective did that give you being on city council? I mean, Virginia Beach is the largest city. So you're now on city council for the largest city in the Commonwealth of Virginia. What did that teach you? I mean, what things were you going through and seeing? How did that make you better and more prepared for being here at the state house?
Well, first, constituent affairs. Obviously, the closer you are to the people you represent, the more they are going to reach out to you. And obviously, everything we do at City Council impacts someone in our city, right? And usually someone's helped and someone maybe not. And so the importance of not only constituent affairs, but how to create that organization to be able to organize and be able to follow up in a timely manner with your constituents, and the importance of that. I also, interestingly enough, learned how much the state kept passing the buck down to, local government, right? I'm sure never. You have these situations where the state would take credit for something and then pass the buck to local government. And I understood how important it was for there to be more local government officials in Richmond to be able to convey that piece of the equation. So learned a lot. Obviously, the budget in the private sector, we have a budget that typically, it's a balance sheet and a profit loss statement. And in government, it's fund-based accounting, right? Every project has a fund. Some of those funds are meant to kind of maybe hide some money here and there until a need pops up. And
right.
So it definitely helped, educate me on the accounting side of the equation for government as well.
Did you guys ever have a burn pile or a place where you burn documents?
We did not.
No, Shep, he can't help you.
So you shred it.
Well, back in those days, I don't know if we had shredders back then. We, maybe it's just rip up real quick,
Pulped it.
There you go.
Shep is involved, for those that don't know and who haven't been listening, but everybody's been listening to what's going on with Shep. He's involved in a little bit of controversy because actually he found something that was being done wrong and improper in his opinion, by the local government, and he dared to stand up against the old guard, and now the old guard's even trying to have him arrested, and that's why in his introduction you heard a collect call from the Mecklenburg County Jail from Shep Moss. And so it's a running thing with us, and we kind of, as we always talk about politics, we talk about state, we talk about national, but Shep brings a local perspective. What's the one thing that you were most proud of when you served? I think you were reelected in 2012 as well, and then you replaced Sal Aliquinto.
I did. Mm-hmm.
After that. But what was the main takeaway that you got, or the thing you did that you're most proud of when you were on the city council there in Virginia Beach?
The budget stuff. There was a year when funding was cut dramatically at the state level for our road maintenance, as well as the composite index hit us pretty hard one year for education. And to work with a team to backfill that funding so we could maintain the quality of services that our citizens came to expect. And that was very important. And then as the money at the state level came back, we never missed a beat. And it's that type of long-term planning, right, Bill? It's, you don't just plan for the next week, the next month, until the next election cycle. You have that long-term planning that makes sure that you continue on to accomplish the vision that the citizens expect and everyone agrees upon. And so that's probably one of the biggest things, was making sure we had that continuity when the state had felt those fiscal challenges.
Sal Aliquinto, now a judge.
Yes.
Really good guy, one of my favorite people. He decides he wants to sit on the General District Court bench at that time.
Yes.
Is he on the Circuit Court bench now?
I think he's still on GD.
Okay. And so at the General District Court level, that's always the best level because, they can appeal you. You can't. You never go to the Supreme Court and have your stuff overturned. You can just appeal it. But a great guy. Mm-hmm. What made you decide, hey, I think I've done all I can do for Virginia Beach at the city council level. I want to run for that awesome and high-paying job at the House of Delegates.
My wife still teases me, not that city council pays me.
I mean, I thought you were an entrepreneur and smart.
Yeah, I mean, my wife. I went from a job making, 28, not that that's that much either, especially before taxes, and a 4-year term to a job that makes, 17 in a 2-year term?
17, yeah.
But it was, grass isn't always greener, as I may have found out. but it really was believing that we needed more small business people and people with local government experience up in Richmond to make sure that we protected those small business entrepreneurs, getting started up, as well as making sure that we limited the impact on local governments, because that really is where rubber meets the road, and there's no elsewhere for that book to be passed.
Yeah.
So that's what kind of got me into it.
And who'd you run against?
Back then, I ran against Brett McKenzie. So interestingly, Brett and I went to the same high school. He was a school board member that represented the same district I represented on city council.
Really? And big win?
It was. We did well. I think we won that one maybe by 8 points, something like that. It was probably up until this last election my largest win.
Okay, because that was after redistricting, and redistricting was in 2011, so you would have been in a fresh district. You get right at it. I mean, when Glenn came, I'd been there for about 3 or 4 years. I mean, it was as if you had been there for a long time, quite frankly, which I think is a good sign, because a lot of times I was told to shut up and keep my head down, and they told me 3 things: make relationships, learn the rules, and keep your mouth shut, at least in the beginning. And then Bill Bowling said I learned the first 2 really well, but I couldn't keep my mouth shut. You were that kind of guy too. I mean, you immediately wanted to make an impact, and I know. My good friend Jeff McWaters, my seatmate and troublemaker in the Senate with me, co-conspirator, was so high on you coming in. I mean, he just said, this guy's going to make a huge difference, and he wasn't lying. You immediately came and you were making changes, and you're going against the grain. Even I remember when they used to say freshmen in the House of Delegates couldn't get a bill passed. That wasn't your problem.
No, I appreciate that. No, I came in under the same mindset you did. We were there to make a difference. So it was make relationships, but keep your mouth shut. And as the speaker back then, obviously I failed at that last one.
See?
But that's how making waves is what makes change, right? And so that's the mindset I had when I came on.
Well, and I remember also too, you guys were still in a supermajority, and when we talk about 100-member House, Republicans had 65?
66.
66, which meant they could do whatever they wanted to, not only to the Democrats. And in 2014, we were in a majority in the Senate. Mm-hmm. The Republicans were by 1 vote. But the House of Delegates kind of ruled us as well. They could do whatever they wanted to us as well. And I remember one of your leaders saying, if a bill comes over 100 or 40 to nothing from the Senate, we're going to have to kill it. That means unanimous. If it comes over 21-19 with Republican support, 21-19 Dem, then it probably has a shot to pass. You guys really ruled the roost. I mean, it was like a meat grinder over there. We hated crossover. I mean, you guys were in control of everything.
Oh, but I can, it's interesting. I was a freshman back then, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so all of us, we got to know each other, but it was our first introduction to many of the senators. So it was just as intimidating for us to go back on the other side. However...
Yeah, because we were usually pissed because you killed all our bills.
Exactly.
We're like, hey, we wear the same colored jersey. What are you doing?
Yeah. Of course, as a freshman, we have nothing to do with that, right? It's all made at the much higher tables than we sat at. But we still had our bills killed, which made it really interesting.
Yeah. So what do you remember one of your first big pieces of legislation that you really championed, that when you look back on it, it was a great win for yourself, hard fought, but a good win?
So there are 2. One I won, one I didn't back then. When I first came on, I wanted to get rid of the property tax on home-based businesses on equipment that they already had for personal use. So, when you start that small business, it used to be that the computer that you were using, the kids would study on. If you did an invoice on it, now it's a business expense, right? Your cell phone that you owned, that you had for personal use. The minute you make a phone call for business, now that's a business, use, and now there's property taxes on it. And I saw an audit at the city level, and when that literally happened, and a gentleman was trying to explain that I already owned these devices, and they said, well, no, now you use them for business. And so I had a bill I put in that exempted any furniture and equipment that was majority use for personal use from being taxed as a home-based business. And so that's the first bill. And it's one that I think is important because, as we all know, that small business grows. And as they grow, they hire more employees, and that's what grows the economy.
Right.
And so I'm really proud of that one.
What was the one that didn't go?
So as you remember, Medicaid expansion, I drafted that bill in conjunction with Tom Russ back then. We had to have a special session at the end of 2015.
We did.
For the bill that Tom and I drafted. And I drafted it after what Governor George Allen did back. You remember the welfare reform legislation?
Yes.
It was drafted exactly after that to help people get off of welfare. So I did the same thing. Not very popular back then, obviously.
No.
But I still think
Not
it
with the
was
Republicans.
No. More conservative than what we have today, and what we
Yes.
voted for in 2018. So unfortunately, we got drugged to the table in 18. We have what we have. But I always believed, and I know you believe the same, and Hermie, as business people, you can't put your head in the sand, right? It's you put your head in the sand. The only thing that happens is the fire gets bigger and a heck of a lot closer to when you finally yank it out. And that's my thought when it comes to challenges that we face as a government. You know, we may not always have the right answer, but unless we're looking for that solution, if we just put our head in the sand, it's just going to get bigger and it's just going to bite us more in the rear end, you know, when we finally decide to take a look at it.
Reach, brother.
Yeah, the best compliment that I can give you, Glenn, is that, you know, running businesses, running a family business in Southside Virginia, you know, I've always paid attention to politics, but never really got involved or wanted to get involved because I really felt like, you know, we would slide to the left a little bit, slide to the right a little bit, but over time it would work itself out. But now the train has just gotten way off the track, and it's real serious about what's going on. And so the skill game issue was what really brought me to Richmond to try to fight for my business. And it wasn't even really about skill game. It was about the government saying, I'm taking this from you and giving it to the casino or somebody else because the government says so. That was my first problem. But my second problem that I didn't really like was the fact that when I came to Richmond as a constituent, as a citizen, as a business owner, I kind of got shut down. You know, there were people in positions like yours that really didn't want to hear from people like me. And I give you credit first and foremost for being somebody who, even though you may or may not have the right answer or on the right side of the argument or whatever, you've always been approachable, and you'll sit down and have a conversation with people about things and learn why people are maybe passionate about an item or the other. And sometimes, you know, you can change a heart and a mind if people know that, you know, the personal story. But I went over to fight for my business, and I got this whole sense of entitlement from the people over there. Like I shouldn't be talking to them, and I should just go along with, you know, what they were dealing. And then I tried to get, you know, my state senator to set me up a meeting with Janet Howell.
Who is that?
That is Louise Lucas.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Because you said someone he meet with you.
It was Senator Howell wouldn't take a meeting with us on the skill game issue at all. And so to me, it boiled down, okay, here's my experience going to Richmond to fight for my business. The government has told me they're taking a part of my business and just giving it to somebody else. They didn't earn it. They just take it. And when I went over to try to give them information that I thought was beneficial for them to have, and part of the argument, they didn't want any parts of that, didn't want to hear it, didn't want to, you know, and it's like we were just supposed to go along with it and take it. And so that's what kind of drove me, and that's the frustrating part. And I think that's one of the things that you're really, you know, really good at on the conversations you and I have had. You know, we've never talked about if you agree with this, you don't agree with this, but you know, you've always been interested. Why this? Why that? How does this affect this? How does this affect that? And I mean, to a business owner, a small business owner, the government is supposed to work for you. And the simple fact that, you know, that I had to sue the Democratic governor of the state I live in to protect what I felt like was protecting my rights as a business owner is a scary proposition. So I appreciate on a number of levels, but I appreciate the fact that you being in the position that you are, and I think maybe coming from your background and your business background, that really helps you look at things maybe with a different set of eyeballs than some of the other people over there are. And I say all that to, you know, to tie this, you know, back in a bow, that, you know, it's really important for people in y'all's positions, Bill and you, Glenn, to, you know, to be able to listen to, you know, the people. And I've said this to Bill, if I said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. There's not enough thought process put into, or enough connecting the dots between the policy that comes out of Richmond and how it really is applied and how it affects the people
at the grassroots level, at the small business level, and it's a unbelievable time that we're in, and I'm just thankful that people like you are in there, and I've got a friend like Bill that is willing to stand up, and try to bring that, remind people every day, the importance of small businesses, and more importantly, the Constitution and people's rights, which seem to get trampled on a lot in Richmond these days.
Oh yeah, well, and Hermie, I'm sorry for the experience you had, and I know Bill believes the same way I do, and tells his people, and I tell anyone that comes to see me, please get involved. If they hear of legislation or they have ideas, please reach out to us. None of us are experts on anything up there.
That's
Some
right.
may be, obviously we have a doctor up there, we have some teachers, we have an accountant, we have a couple of business people, but none of us are experts on everything, right? And so I tell people, we think we may have ideas, but we're not the doctor 24/7 or the small business owner 24/7 or pick the industry. So unless people get involved and reach out to us, if they leave us up to our own devices, they may not like the outcome. I mean, our job is to take all that information, be as educated as possible on all sides of an issue, and cast a vote that's best to help those that we represent and help them move their families and their businesses forward. But we can't do it unless we have that education from them that really do it on the ground 24/7 in that area of expertise.
The day that really kind of set the fire under me, before we even filed a lawsuit, I tried to do it the right way. I tried to come over and set up meetings and go through the proper channels, but I was watching the live feed on the Senate floor one day, and Senator Howell basically said that skill games had cost the lottery $140 million in sales. That because of skill games, we were taking money from the kids in schools and this and that. And not only am I a partner of the lottery in my convenience store and truck stop business, have been since the lottery, since its inception, but I also had a 20-plus year personal service relationship with the lottery. They sponsored every race car I drove for the last 15 years of my career. So I was involved on the sales and marketing side of the lottery as well. So I was getting all the emails and all the stuff about lottery sales and what makes them go up and down and all that. Anyway, so I saw Senator Howell make this comment on the Senate floor. Basically, we got to get, she calls them gray machines. We got to get rid of gray machines because they've killed the Virginia lottery. So I went over the next morning. I called Louise Lucas, and Louise and I were co-grand marshals of the UCROP's Christmas Parade in Richmond in 1994. Known her ever since. I go see Louise, and I said, Louise, Senator Lucas, what Janet Howell was saying on the Senate floor yesterday, that information is not accurate. And here are my P&Ls from my convenience stores and my truck stops that we have skill games and the lottery. And also Scott Klepper with Pilot Flying J was with me. They've got 20 locations in Virginia. Same story. So I went to see Louise and I put it up there and I said, this is not matching up with what Janet is saying. Will you, and then I said, I need you to go take this information to Senator Howell. And Senator Lucas was like, I can't do that. I said, okay, will you set me up a meeting with Senator Howell? She said, no, I can't do that. On the skill game issue, you're going to be on your own. I said, so that's my first problem. I'm a constituent of yours. I employ 300 plus people and but you can't help me broker a meeting, so that was strike one. So then Scott Klepper and I walked down the hall to Senator Howell's office. We start talking to her aide about setting up a meeting, and she finally says, well, what subject matter do you want to speak to Senator Howell about? And I said, skill games. And the little aide went, like that. She says, well, Senator Howell is not taking meetings on the skill game issue. And also, you need to understand, or you need to know that Senator Howell kind of views people in the skill game industry as somewhat sleazy. Her aide said this to me and to Scott Klepper with Pilot Flying J. So you want to talk about being frustrated with a government. I couldn't get my own senator to, while she acknowledged that flies in the face of the information she had been given, she wouldn't help broker a meeting for me. Senator Howell, that was spewing all this stuff on the Senate floor that was very detrimental to my business and in general, wouldn't take a meeting on the issue. And so, I was kind of bagged into a corner with where we stood and said, if somebody doesn't stand up and fight. You know, my family's business, my family was built on the free market. You know, we build one location at a time, you know, and if you do things right, you build another one. And, you know, and here they were, you know, going to send Rosies to Emporia where I live, but they're not going to play on the same level playing field that I'm on. I'm not anti-Rosies, and I'm not really anti-casino, but they shouldn't come to Emporia and have a monopoly on games and then also get my bar business and my restaurant business. And so to me, it was worth fighting for. And so now this whole process, you know, since last June, Bill and I stood on the steps of the Capitol. We talk about it now, but like everybody laughed at us. Oh, Stanley, there's no way y'all are going to win that case. You'll never get a day in court. Never get this, never get that. And here we are. Now we've been winning on SB 971. Now they throw the budget at us, and there's language in the budget, which we'll talk about in a moment. But it's just like they just, you know, if it hadn't been for the stand that we took, the skill game issue would have far been settled by now. It'd have been over and done with. And not just us, but more importantly than that, small business owners and operators across the entire Commonwealth of Virginia, including the district that you represent, would have lost that piece of revenue out of their business, and it would have been terminal to a lot of these businesses, the smaller mom and pop operators and things. And with no discussion, no reason, just go along with it. And so I'll forever be grateful to Bill for believing in me and believing in the cause and believing what we were doing and why we were doing it. And it brings me back to my, I'll get to a question here for you. Is like, how can people in Virginia that are legislators, that are representing everybody, quite frankly, how can they just choose out-of-state casino interest type monies and turn their back on the rights of small businesses like some of these people have been doing in the Commonwealth of Virginia? And by the way, through the course of our lawsuit, we have created an unbelievable group of small business owners and operators that come to court every time we go to court, hundreds of them. And they're finally seeing the light, and they're realizing how important, over the next couple of elections, how important it is to find out who's doing what and vote. But, I know if you represent Virginia, you're supposed to be for all business and everybody's opportunities. How can some of these people that we have forced them to come out front and admit that they are choosing one over the other, how, as a elected official, how are some of these people doing this?
Hermie, that's a great question, and I don't know if I've got the answer, because I always believe the right place to be is what Bill always preaches, and probably a couple times a year on the floor of the Senate. It's a level playing field, right? I've told people it doesn't matter what you think about skill games. They're coming. They're in Virginia, like you said. They're in Rosie's. They're here. They're not going away. The question is should there be a level playing field with Rosie's, with the casinos, with our small businesses, with our truck stops, where everyone has that same chance to provide that service, that entertainment value, and let the consumer pick where they want to, partake in it. And that's what we're getting in the middle of as a government. We're literally, getting rid of the competition for the casinos coming in. And what concerns me the most, I think we should never hamper any business, right? And, I obviously with, the skill game issue, you've got a great business. I think I've taken showers at all your truck stops back in 15 and 16. And, when I was going around the state for lieutenant governor. And you may very well be fine. But like you said, there's a lot of small businesses, ones that I helped with their PPP loans back during the pandemic that barely made it, ones that attest that if without the skill games back then, they would not have made it.
Right.
The same ones that still are not out of the woods yet, but that little bit of revenue coming from the skill games is helping them stay in business, stay with their neighborhood restaurants or convenience stores. And those are the ones that are going to go out of business if we yank this out from underneath of them. And so that's what concerns me the most, is that not only are we not, putting ourselves on the side of making sure there's a level playing field and fair competition, but because of the position that the General Assembly's taken, we're actually pulling the rug out of these small businesses that many of them won't be here tomorrow if these things go under.
A lot of it depends on how you look at things. Bill and I back and forth all the time. When
a couple months ago, before the budget was getting ready to come out, which y'all can talk more about the language in the budget, what it means and all that, but before we knew for sure that there was going to be language in the budget, we were trying to find out more information or get answers as to if that language was going to be there, and if so, what it might be, because we were trying to decide. We wanted to go to court. We wanted to go to court and get it resolved, but we needed to know if there was going to be language in the budget affecting skill games, because if so, we may need to potentially amend our complaint to handle that when we went back to court. Well, we, through Bill and through other people, we try to go ask Barry Knight, not what is it, but is there going to be skill game language in the budget? And his comment, and I think he made a public comment to a reporter, we're going to just make them wait.
Right.
We'll make people wait. Well, to him, it may have been make Hermie and Bill Stanley wait. But to me, it made me think, what about the mom and pop operators and these convenience stores and the little restaurants and bars and things that are watching the news, calling Bill and I, coming to court all the time? You're making them wait to decide, can they keep their business open? Can they hire this person? Can they give a raise? Can they invest in the infrastructure of their business? So that's the frustrating thing with me, that's kind of, giving me the urge to maybe get involved in politics, as much as I don't like it, is that some of these people, and in this case, Barry Knight, it's just so close-minded to think that it should be all about him at that particular moment, when all of these, hundreds of thousands of people, when you put all the people together and the employees that simply not only deserve an answer, but they have constitutional rights.
Well, wait, I mean, how many people that work at convenience stores that depend on these skill games live in the district that he represents, compared to how many people that own casinos from out of state live in the district that he represents? And why would you pick those out of state interests over your own people, who you are also putting regulations on and mandating a higher wage to pay, and have been really, as a government, taxing on these small businesses during this pandemic? I mean, I just don't know how you get there.
And the one thing to keep in mind, as people are listening, Hermie, you and the others with skill games never advocated for kind of just a laissez-faire, we're going to do whatever we please, right? You've always been advocating for proper, fair regulations that were level across everyone, to make the enforcement of taxation on the machines, that everyone paid the same amount in the fair share, right? So all you were looking for kind of was that level playing field, the equality with other entities, and that's what kind of surprises me a little bit, right? It's one thing to say the small guys can't, they're looking for a special handout or not to be able to be under the same regulations, but that's not true. All you were asking for was to be able to have the same opportunities with the same enforcement and the same costs.
We've tried, and Bill and I and our team have had to take each narrative one by one and disprove it. So I've already mentioned about what Janet Howell said about lottery. We proved, in fact, we took a deposition right here in this office with Kevin Hall with Virginia Lottery, and he finally admitted that, number one, the year of the tax and regulation scheme under ABC, the skill games, the lottery also had their biggest year in sales that they ever had. Yeah. Not only online, but also in the stores, scratch tickets, all that. Okay, that's number one.
Total falsehood.
Yeah, the whole
turned out to be false. What they were claiming on the floors of the House and Senate.
Yeah,
this was ruining lottery. BS. It was actually, if you looked at the records, it was actually improving lottery, where they had the skill games.
Right.
The receipts were up for the scratchers.
So it's not surprising. I mean, I majored in economics in school. I always loved economics.
You went to MIT too, didn't you? You brainiac.
Well, that was a 3-year, 1-week-a-year program. So not the degree program, but something different. But when you look at it, saying that the skill games, cut the lottery funding would be the same as saying, why does the casino have blackjack and roulette, right? Because roulette takes away from blackjack, and we know that's not true, right? They're actually complement pretty good. It brings more people in. Right. I've been to your truck stops. People are driving the trucks. They're sitting there. They're not going to play the lottery for 5 hours or 4 hours. They may not even think about gambling during the time they're at your truck stop, but they may look at that entertainment value of that skill game, and they get on that, and then as they're looking out the door, they just realize, I've been gambling to win money over here. I did okay. Let me go buy a lottery ticket. It puts that part into their mind. So I would argue in many cases, and obviously the evidence proves out, that having those machines in your locations actually increases people's thought about the lottery and the propensity to play the lottery.
And that's what the evidence has played out. So we got Kevin Hall to admit that lottery had its best year in sales ever, the one year that our games were taxed and regulated under ABC. He also admitted
welcome.
under questioning from Senator Stanley that the information that Janet Howell was reading from on the Senate floor came from the casino lobbies. So they provided that information for him.
Yeah. And actually a company that handles the kiosk when you go and like you get a scratcher ticket from an automatic machine was the one pushing the false narrative, and they're ones that make gambling games of chance machines. So the fix was kind of even internally working with the lottery.
So then the next narrative was they want to say these skill games they came into the state in the middle of the night. Nobody knew they were coming.
Through the back door.
Yeah, through the back door. Well, Officer Kirby from Department of ABC, Chief Deputy that was in charge of enforcement and regulation, on the stand at our injunction hearing back in December of last year, testified that they were brought these games to the Department of ABC and they independently looked at them, played them, got independent analysis of them, that they were games of skill, not games of chance, and thereby were legal in the Commonwealth of Virginia. The games were brought to them and they were, quote unquote, approved them before they went into the, to the stores. So we've just had, and then they go to about the, where they're not, there's no way they can be taxed.
That's why they call them
regulated.
gray machines, because they're in the gray area and they roll out in. In fact, I think one of the manufacturers went around to every county and city and said, we've got this ruling from ABC. Can we put these in your county? If a county said no, they didn't do it. They didn't put them in. So they only went where they were wanted or where the counties worked with them to make it happen. So this invasion type argument that they made was not true either. Right. I mean, it was absolutely false.
It's one thing after the next. And then, they go to since they're games of skill, they cannot be regulated. Well, it was a simple but effective tax and regulation system through ABC, which Department of ABC testified at our hearing that they had virtually no issues with oversight, with collecting tax, none of that, but it just didn't fit.
Well, and here's why, too, because they were in ABC establishments, and if you screwed it up, you lost your ABC license, and beer was actually more important to a lot of these convenience stores, and they had to be in well-lit places, so you had that kind of internal regulatory process already in place, and the ABC just, as a matter of course, made it very simple. The most shocking thing, Glenn, is that a government body actually creates a simple regulatory process that works.
Right.
And then we just and then we make $150 million and we kiss it away.
Right. Well, look, I don't sit at the tables with the casinos, but it's kind of hard not to think that this is not just to, clear the field for the casinos. Because I'll look at another bill. Bill, you may remember the bill. So I wrote the Texas Hold'em legislation a few years ago.
Yes.
The Democrats in the House killed my legislation because their floor, I got into a little.
So when they were in the majority.
Yes, they were in the majority. Their floor leader, I got into spat, but it's the same verbiage that chap got out and we passed, right? And you look at the legislation this year, and it actually rewrites the rules of Texas Hold'em. Now, Texas Hold'em rules were not written by the Commonwealth of Virginia. They weren't written by the federal government. It is a game. We probably have all seen, the World Series of Hold'em, out in Vegas, and it's interesting. So for those that play, but you sit down at the table and you play until there's one person left. And the way you make sure that eventually there's only one person left is the blinds or the bet goes up over time, and eventually you only have one person. There's no predetermined end time. These games aren't 5 minutes. They're there until someone, and that's the way they're played around the world. The legislation that was passed actually says that our charities that are able to conduct Texas Hold'em can only do so is that there's a predetermined end time, not a time to end or before, a predetermined end time. Now, explain to me how you force a game to be over by a certain time when the rules are what they are, or how do you make it so it takes longer for a game to end? To meet some state regulation. It's asinine. It's stupid. It goes against Texas Hold'em rules that are practiced around the world, but it stops charities from being able to have those games in the bingo halls that was passed only a couple years prior.
Yeah, and it seems, and I've said this on the show before, but I'm totally convinced because they basically said, if they could shut down the bingo hall for the old ladies of the poor, they would do it because they want to monopolize everything. They see everything, even the smallest bingo hall, as a threat, and that's big casinos. And then guess what? Once they eliminate the threat, then they'll come back to this legislature, which they now have, in their pocket, and they'll say, "Oh, by the way, you know what? Let's open it up. Let's open up skill games or games of chance for our convenience stores. And by the way, we'll provide them all." That's what will happen. I mean, eliminate the competition, eliminate the risk, then control the game, control it all. And that's what you're going to see. That's step one. And then we in the legislature look like rubes. Yeah. I mean, total boobs. And get played like that because, wow, thank you for the giant donation to my campaign. You really must support me. You really must like me. Oh, you want me to vote how? Well, you support me, so I'm going to support you. That's the hamster wheel we're on. And it's unfortunate because I voted against every form of gambling. Mm-hmm. Until now, IR 36 because I have obviously a lawsuit and a client who has an interest in the outcome of anything, so I just am careful about it. But I've said it here before. I wasn't for casinos, because they kept saying, Glenn, and I want to talk about how you have really helped Danville, Virginia, and what you were willing to go outside your district to help revitalize Southside Virginia. But they go, hey, we'll put it in Bristol. Hey, we'll put it in Martinsville or Danville. Hey, we'll put it in Portsmouth. Because those are poor areas. It's like somehow this is the white pill, the panacea, that's going to solve the economic problems that our governments have created of these once mighty areas. Why don't you see one in Northern Virginia, Glenn?
Right.
Why?
Right. No, you're 100% right.
Because they're dirty. They're scuzzy. Listen to Janet Howell's words about a skill game. It's the same. She doesn't want a casino in her backyard. She's going to put it in those areas.
Yep. I'll tell you.
That she looks down upon.
When we talked about casinos, I've been to casinos when I go to an area. Shelly and I will go. She's a slot person. I'm a table person. Or a shopping person. I'm a table person.
I love going to casinos too.
Yeah. And so, but I was against casinos coming here the way they're coming here. When people asked my opinion, only a couple did. I was freshman back in the day. I said, what I really want is I want the high net worth individual that's going to the Greenbrier, right? That may be going up to Atlantic City. So I loved what the Greenbrier did when they said, okay, West Virginia, you can have casinos, but you have to pay for that room night, right? You can't comp it, you got to pay for that room night. And now it's just not that person on the street who can't make ends meet, spending their last $500 trying to turn it into $5,000. As we all know, that's a losing proposition. So how do I balance not taking advantage of those that are less fortunate, but not lose the opportunity that may exist that's leaving our state? And my thought is let's have the opportunity for like the Greenbrier, bring it to the homestead. And if you can afford the $400 a night room, then yes, you can go down there and you can play. And I thought that was a good middle ground, not letting these things pop up all over the state. And now my concern is that we have them. Let's make sure we have the level playing field, and we're not having these out-of-state casinos put our local businesses out of business.
And a big problem.
They are, and they're trying to, and they don't care, and they're so fearful. I mean, they're so scared of the little guy. What is one quickie mart in Franklin County that has two games going to do to the big bad casinos? It just raked in 137 million, was it, in a week in Bristol?
So the other part is I call it an unintended consequence. They were so narrow-minded or had the blinders on to get rid of skill games on last July 1 before we got an injunction that at the same time when all the games got unplugged, ABC enforcement oversight went away.
Yep.
So now the legal people like me were dead. We were dogged, not running, but the illegal people showed up all over the state with no oversight and no regulation. And guess what the casino people try to do? Oh, skill games are everywhere, and it's not us. And so another narrative that they try to push that, the Sadlers and the skill games, they're in vape shops and they're in, hole in the wall buildings. They're in the back of tractor trailers, mobile units going across the state, and they play until the law shows up. Then
criminal element.
But they did that to try to get the games banned. But I want to ask you, and you can, Bill, can ask it a different way.
Wait. I mean, just before you go to that question, because I like the way you're going on. Do not forget that the rule of unintended consequences is they were in such a hurry to ban skill games. Those people that led the charge, the Barry Knights, the Janet Howes, the heads of appropriation and finance, House and Senate respectively, that they couldn't do because they were cutting with a sledgehammer and not a scalpel, is that they opened the back of the barn and let in the criminal element. They let in a proliferation of illegal games. Now these illegal games, you want to talk about choke points for casinos? But now they're trying to say the legitimate games that are turned back on by our injunction are a part of these illegal games. Or they're calling them all skill games, like you just said. But they have created an illegal marketplace because they're so short-sighted and didn't think this through. They were just so wanting to make the casinos happy. And what they did was, I think, worse and more detrimental to the casino interest. And I don't know about you, but you can drive to any kind of convenience store and see games that were not licensed or registered by ABC, and they're running right now. And there's no enforcement because there's just no way to enforce it.
We even had a business to open up in South Hill, which our local police closed, but instead of the stickers, they had copies of the yellow stickers on the machines. So talking about illegal gaming.
So what is your...
Well, there is a list, though. I mean, we have the list of every game that was registered by the ABC. It's
well, these weren't on that list. But...
No, but yeah, they're counterfeiting the yellow sticker. The yellow sticker is not the determining factor.
Sure.
Glenn, what is your opinion on two things? The idea or the concept of legislating policy through the budget, and especially in our case where there's ongoing litigation. And when you read the language on skill games in the budget, what is your dissertation of it?
So I've always had a problem legislating through the budget. When I first came on, I'll never forget my first year. So I never knew the toughest day of the year. We all take tough votes. For me, the toughest day of the year was all those budget amendments, and Bill knows what I'm talking about. It's that one day you're on the floor and there's all these budget amendments, and they're, in many cases, bills that had failed that get brought back up on the floor. And I came in the majority, right? So sometimes those bills failed, got brought back up, and I got stuck. It may be something that I voted for, but I voted against it as a budget amendment because I don't believe in legislating through the budget. Mm-hmm. And so, it's almost like I had whiplash sometimes. I got the phone call, you supported this before, but I did when it went through the legislative channel, not the budget channel. I don't believe in 2-year laws, which is essentially what the budget is.
Yeah.
So I've always had a problem. Now, both sides do it. It's common practice, but there are 3 ways that you have a change to the budget. You legislate through it. The first way is when you have the budget come together and a senator or a House delegate member will put in a budget, and it's a one-off that everyone gets to talk about on the floor, and we take an up or down vote on that particular item, whether or not to put it in the budget. We all get our say. All 100 of us, or in Bill's case, 40 of them, get to take the vote. And even though I don't like legislating through the budget, we all get a voice. The second way is the governor sends down a budget amendment. And once again, it's a one-off. We all get to have our voice, and it gets voted up and down. The third way, and I think the more dangerous way, is when you have a House budget and a Senate budget. It goes to a conference committee, and a few House and delegates and senators get together, and they're there to iron out the differences between the two budgets. Sometimes our budget includes some things theirs doesn't. Sometimes theirs includes stuff ours doesn't. And it's supposed to kind of iron all that out and bring us back one document. And that is an up or down vote only. There's no one-off conversations. There's no individual votes on any of those items once they're ironed out. But when it comes back to us, and there's things inside of it that was never in either budget, that was not a piece of legislation prior, and in that manner, it's done so that we don't get to have the conversations on the floor. The will of the individual legislators is not allowed to be expressed. That is the part I'm concerned about, and that's kind of how this language ended up inside the budget. It was done during conference. It was not in the House or Senate as it came together. And when it popped up into the final out of conference committee, there was not a one-off conversation or an up or down vote. The vote was, if you didn't like that language and you voted against it, you voted against 10% of teachers' raises over 2 years, right?
Right.
And everything else in there.
And when I came in, I think it was Frank Wagner and Walter Stosh and everybody else said, you do not legislate through the budget. If you lost and it got a fair hearing in committee and your bill lost, instead don't try it. And if you do try it, not only will we kill that, but if you had something in there for your district, we might take that out too. And they were very stark about that. I mean, I remember William Wampler saying that. He used to teach me. First year, he was my mentor. And very important, he taught me all about the budget machinations and don't legislate through the budget. We do not legislate. And occasionally, rarely, if there was a need to, like you said, a one-off, just a kind of thing to fix something real quick. but not to create. I mean, I've never seen criminal code amended. They amended the criminal code here. And what bothered me the most is usually, we're comparing two processors, right, Glenn? So I propose a bill, let's say exactly like the budget amendment, that language is. It would be referred to a committee. Public notice would be given. The public and those interested parties would be allowed to testify in front of that committee. The committee would debate it. The committee would vote it up or down. That would be at least 15 people where I'm at. I guess your committees are kind of bigger. If it passes committee, it now then goes to the floor for another debate, 3 readings, amendments, more consideration, and a vote. So now 40 people have looked over it totally, 15 of them repetitively. Yep. It goes over to your side. It's presented to another committee, a bigger committee. You vote on it. If it gets out of that, it goes to your floor. Now 100 people, plus whatever that committee amount repetitiveness was, get to look at it, consider it, debate it, vote it. The public sees it. It's transparent.
Yes.
In the budget drafting, and especially, it happens all the time in terms of when one side, we draft a budget in Senate, House drafts their budget, never agrees, we reject each other's budget, move it in a conference. The most powerful person, I always say after the speaker, in the General Assembly is the appropriations chair,
yes.
To a lesser degree the Senate finance chair, because the budget emanates from the House. Yes. So there's a primacy that they believe is there. They then elect we do 5, I think, from each side.
I think we take one more, I think.
Okay.
Right.
And so they get together. So a small committee meets. Sometimes you get updates, sometimes you don't.
Right.
Oh, that's good. Things are going bad. I mean, we're kind of in agreement on some big things, but really fall apart on these other things. And blah, blah, blah. And just hang on, guys. And, William Wamper used to say, boys, it's going to be a long evening. Bring your laundry down to the river and beat it against the rocks to clean it, because we're going to be here a while. That kind of stuff. And then they come out and they go, surprise, here's your budget.
Right.
But here, so you're talking about a maximum of 15 people, and really it's not. It's the chairman and their little cronies that they like, that do all the crafting, and the budget writers in our legislative system. The legislative services, great people that work very hard.
Yes.
We admire them greatly. We don't blame them for this. But that's when the hobgoblins get in there. The lobbyists get into these ears of only a few people, and the public never sees it.
Right.
And then, just as you said, whatever comes out of the oven, you don't get to say, wait a minute, like we pick out budget amendments, we pick them out, we vote them up or down. You're stuck with what's in the cake. What's been baked in the cake is what you get, and that's what kills me the most here. That's what's the most dastardly part, is that, and quite frankly, these were not Virginians that wrote this budget language. These were casino lawyers maybe that gave it a shot, and in my perfect opinion, my humble opinion, maybe perfect, we'll see, it is crappier than the ones we had in Senate Bill 971. I mean, when you guys see something like that, I know there were rumblings on your side of the aisle. There were on ours. But just as you said, man, I want to vote against this because of one issue here, one issue there, that they sneak in for their own constituency, their own special interest. But if I vote that down, all of a sudden, people are going to say I hate policemen because I voted against their race.
Yep.
Or more funding for school security. Yep. Because you voted for all of it or you vote for none of it.
Right. And it really confuses the public. I mean, I give Hermie credit. That language comes out, and I think, Hermie, you sent emails to all of us, and a lot of the people you reached out to probably did. I know some people in my district, and it was, please vote against this. And I'm like, I can't. Because the public doesn't realize the process that this came out in, right? It's not the one-off scenario. And so I had spent a lot of time trying to explain to people that, look, I don't like it. I don't believe it should have been done. I believe it should have gone through a different process. But at the end of the day, I can't vote against the largest, budget for education in the history of Virginia.
And the chairman and the people on the committee knew that position they put y'all in as legislators.
Because not only that. So the vote was, usually you have a pretty overwhelming for vote. You have some. I would have voted against it. You usually have, and for different reasons. I mean, there's a lot of good in there. There's a lot of bad.
Yeah.
I vote against a lot of budgets because I don't think we should spend more than we have. There's many reasons. But in this instance, they can tout. What did the budget pass in the House? Do you remember? It was something like 88 to 12 or something?
Yeah. We lost just barely double digits.
Yeah, and I think we had 6 or 7 that voted against it. So you're talking 32 to 8, maybe in that. People say overwhelming, supermajority. So they're trying to say supermajority was for this new language in the budget with regard to skill games. That's not what it says. But that's what they try to carry into a courtroom or into the public sphere, while never letting that debate be had, never letting those voices of those those convenience store owners that really need this to be heard, and never letting the public weigh in and say, hey, wait a minute, if we're going to balance it, keep it balanced.
You know, you mentioned that process doesn't allow for the legislators to have their voice put in that budget process sometimes. Well, more importantly, it doesn't let Virginians have a voice in that process because they're forcing your hand to vote on up or down.
What did you think of the? What is your interpretation of the language in the budget? How was it changed? How was it different from 871?
So do you understand it? And if
So I still think it's ambiguous. No, I defer to attorneys. I stayed at Holiday Inn Express last week, but that's about as far as I got. But I still think it's ambiguous. I think there's problems with it. I was a little bit surprised. I mean, I can only imagine what those attorneys make. And I mean, hell, mine makes $4.50 an hour, and he doesn't work for High Power Casino, so I don't know what they. So for them to draft that language, they were probably under the gun. But I don't think it adds the clarity that one would expect. But I leave that up to the courts and to attorneys like Bill.
Well, and it's a 2-year criminal code. Who does that? Who has a 2-year?
Well, that's the other issue is
the budget's a 2-year.
Yeah, you want to give public safety whiplash.
Yeah.
And what do we do, Bill? So is this like marijuana, where okay, we find you guilty, you're going to be under parole and whatever the case is, don't do it again. 2 years later, the law goes away. Do we go expunge your record now?
Right.
I mean,
that which was temporarily illegal becomes legal again.
Right.
That which was legal now becomes temporarily illegal. And again, it's we use euphemisms and stupid phrases like kicking the can down the road. This is like leaving a turd in the punch bowl. I mean, how do you get around it? How do you deal with it? But the language itself, again, I think I said it earlier. They are trying to cut with a scalpel, but they can't. They can only do it with a sledgehammer, because what they do is they end up collecting up games of skill, because a game of skill is a game of skill. We've had them ad infinitum since time immemorial. They've been illegal in Virginia. Games of skill are what you see at the county fair or the state fair. Right. They're Galaga or Miss Pac-Man. And the way that they define, a skill game as having some internal counter, quite frankly, can be seen as being almost anything. And how the hell is a cop going to know when he looks at the machine, that's got an internal counter that does A, B, and C? How's he going to know that? How's he going to get a search warrant to find that out? He doesn't have enough probable cause because it doesn't look anything different from anything else. And it's going to sweep up the Dave & Buster's again and the Chuck E. Cheese's again and create a whole mess that couldn't, because they just can't help themselves. Then they say, what's an appropriate reward? We only get an appropriate reward equal to the value of the game that you put in it. Well, if I play Miss Pac-Man and I'm damn good at it, I put a quarter in and I get 10 free replays, which is basically 75 cents to another $1. That game is illegal. That game is illegal. A teddy bear. If I do ring toss and I win a big giant teddy bear, if the ring toss costs me 50 cents, but I win a $10 teddy bear, well, then, you know what? The carny over there is going to jail.
Right.
I'm going to make a lot of money as a lawyer. They don't know what they're doing. And so nothing that they put in the new language changes anything that they had in the old language. Again, it's either ban them all or let them tax and regulate.
Right.
You cannot cut
and that's
one
really,
part out and leave another
really,
part in.
Glenn, you already know this, but just for the people listening, that's all small business owners like me in this group of businesses and business owners that have gotten behind this crusade we're on. All we want is to legally be able to operate our games, be appropriately taxed and regulated. We stay in our lane. There's plenty of business for all of us. We stay in our lane, do our business. The casinos stay in their lane, do their business. Rosie's, internet, lottery, whatever the case may be. But we feel like that we deserve and have every right to operate our games the way we always have, do it legally, appropriately, and what I hope eventually we get to, once we get through these hurdles with court and otherwise, that we all sit down in a room one day and work on what is really the enemy of all of us, and that's the illegals.
Yeah.
That's what we really have got to come together on and give some enforcement powers back to, not only whether it be ABC or our local Commonwealth attorneys, or, nobody knows what to do now, how to do it. You're talking about a lawsuit, talking about going in and trying to lock somebody down for what? I mean, it's too much vagueness. So I hope eventually, and sooner rather than later, we put all this behind us, get on the same page, put the proper things in place for us to operate, like we're supposed to in casinos and Rosie's, and then we put our teams together to get rid of the illegals. That's really
Well, it's
what
not
we
only
need to
that.
do.
I mean, look, casinos have the motto that the house always wins.
Yep.
Skill games, the difference is whether it's ring toss or one of these games, gaming devices in a truck stop, is that the player can win every time using a skill or her skill. These illegal games, the proliferation of such, are not only games of chance, they're manipulated even worse against the player. And then there's no tax revenue. There's no taxes collected. It's usually a criminal element involved somehow, somewhere. And somebody's in a little room in their computer controlling the odds. It's a manipulation of the person who's trying to enjoy and maybe spend their money in a way that they feel like they can or they want to. And so we have to do something about that. Quite frankly, I think we could use the proceeds from skill game regulation and tax to clean up all the illegal gaming. And then keep it away. You know, you could create zones for casinos and all the other things and do it in harmony, homogeneously, instead of in this kind of patchwork attack
it's
zone
nothing
that they
more,
have right now.
Nothing more frustrating, whether it be in this line of work or any other business, when you get caught up in somebody else's, shadow as far as collateral damage, you might say. Because people say to me all the time, they put all of us together in a group. You should just go along with this, go along with that, whatever. And I'm like, that'd be just like
find some other way to make income.
If Glen Davis is driving through Emporia and he gets a speeding ticket, but writing me a ticket, right. He did wrong, not me. And it's just an unfortunate.
Yeah, I know a little bit about that feeling.
So I mean, we've got a court case, but where do you see us all right now in the legislature? I mean, I've got to basically R36. I've got to abstain for the reasons I talked about earlier. Where do you see this going? And you've even been talking about really taking some action on behalf of convenience stores, restaurateurs, truck stops, the small business owner, and the person that likes to play these games but will never show up at the Portsmouth Casino. Right. What are your ideas about that?
Well, I mean, you and I've had a conversation. I'm in the middle of drafting some legislation. We all, Bill, you've heard it, I'm sure, since you've been in General Assembly. I heard it from day one that we don't pass legislation that impacts a pending lawsuit. Not only does this impact a pending lawsuit, but it was actually in there to impact a pending lawsuit.
Yes.
And so, I think that, there should be that level playing field. So I'm in the process of drafting that legislation and getting that dropped.
Good for you.
We need to do something to, provide that level playing field and give fairness and have, honestly, at this point, have fairness in the courts, right? I mean, that's all we're looking for at this point. Hermie, you said it many a times, if this had gone through the courts and the courts ruled against you, so be it. You had your day in court, right? There was no thumb on the weight, but obviously that's what's happening now is you got that piece, the thumb being put on it. So
on the scale of justice.
On the scale,
yes.
yeah. So take the thumb off the scale and give you that fair day. So I think that's kind of where I think my head is right now, Bill, is seeing if we can do something to have that fairness in the court, and obviously going into next year.
What I'm seeing right now, and especially with the economy swirling around us, high inflation. We're seeing a tilt in the job market going downward. We've had record revenues in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We've been very fortunate. I think what we saw in the last budget process, which is the first end of the biennium, we had so much revenues. There were a lot of pet projects, and they were spending money like drunken sailors in Singapore, and everybody wanted some piece for this or that. I don't think that well stays that deep. Right. I think the well will dry. And, where do you think we're going to be next year? I mean, tax and regulate. In terms of revenues, are we going to be missing maybe that $250 million that all of a sudden would pay for lab schools or something else that it's the governor's priority? I don't think that even the court case ends the matter. Right. Obviously and ultimately, I, like you, believe that the legislature has to make a policy decision, and it's the best. I think it's in our best interest to make it in favor of small business. And do you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. Level playing field for the small businesses. It's kind of interesting. So, my background's tech, and I like to look out, down the road. And I've done some business inside the virtual reality space, the augmented reality space. The casinos don't know what's coming. I mean, I will tell you, you give me a building with 20 10 by 10 rooms, and I'll give you a casino without paying for anything. I mean, I had a bill this year, Bill, and it didn't make it over to the Senate. I hate when government tries to regulate things and technology makes them irrelevant, right? Or laws that become irrelevant.
Because we're always behind.
Right, we're always behind.
Always behind.
And so, I like to play
sucks.
Texas Hold'em. I don't consider the game of skill, or a game of luck. I consider it skill, and if we all played, we can understand that. But it's illegal to play online. But it's interesting that for $3 a month, you go to NordVPN, and you look like you have an IP address from Dallas, and now you can play online Texas Hold'em. Not that any of us ever would, because it's illegal. But the same thing exists. So you get that same $3 a month VPN, and you go to ignitecasino.com. And you can't go there with a Virginia IP address, but with a Dallas or I think 20 other states, you can go there. Those casino games, they're not animated. It's a real dealer on the other side if it's blackjack. It's a real person spinning the roulette wheel. What they've done is they've given you this camera as if you're sitting on the chair. Wow. So all that exists. So if you've looked at the virtual reality space where you can put on a headset and have 360 degrees 4K, now what does it take for me to have a casino in an area? Well, it takes a small room with a couple of those headsets, and that's about it. And a partnership with Ignite Casino or Pick Someone. There's a reason why these casinos are starting these virtual reality spaces, because they know that going into these brick and mortars are not going to be necessary, that you can almost get the same experience from sitting in your living room and being in that space. That allows the small entrepreneur that's innovative to get in that space and heavily compete against the casinos. Now what are you going to do? Right? So I get a feeling the casinos have a bigger fight coming when we can create the same thing they're creating, arguably, in a virtual world for 1/1000th the cost.
Yeah, and it's going to revolutionize everything, isn't it?
I wanted to ask you, you touched on something, well, Bill touched on it earlier. How do you, as a delegate, how do you plan to replace the loss of revenue from the skill games? It was 143 million, 150 million.
It's been estimated
at that point, whatever,
$250 million to $500 million a year.
How do you, because you're a budget guy, that's the part that you like. How do you factor that back in over, extrapolate that loss over a couple of budget sessions maybe? How do you fill that void?
Well, I mean, it obviously our revenues grew every year, and it impacts, whether it impacts public safety, whether it impacts education, it's going to impact something, right?
Sure.
Whether it impacts just the reserve that we're able to. I mean, every dollar makes a difference. Now, I will tell you, I can't tell you what specifically it's going to impact, and we deal with a rather large, $200 billion biennium budget, but it obviously it has an impact. This year, Hermie spoke to it, and one thing the governor was amazing. So we're our money committee chairs. We recognized a lot of the money we had this year was one-time funding, so it got used on one-time expenses. But there's an interest on some of that to probably be some lobbyists out there have a desire for some of that to continue forward on some of these things, but that requires funds, not a decrease in funds, but a continuation of certain funds that, unfortunately, like with the skill games, may not be continuing.
Because a good rule of practice is don't take one-time money for reoccurring expenses,
Exactly.
correct?
Yes, sir.
Hard for that government entity not to do. I mean, it's hard to do.
But it's what you want to try to do.
Yep.
Well, and we're going to be looking for new revenue streams. We're running out. Once marijuana becomes legal, you've got that. I mean, we're making legal all the vices at this point in time. I don't know what we've got left except prostitution, which got to help us if we do that. But, the thing that we have in front of us is to be mindful of the taxpayer money, but also be mindful of the businesses that generate the taxes.
Yeah.
And so this is a really small business issue I know is near and dear to your heart, and I just love your advocacy. But, we've got an election coming up. Not, of course, this year's the congressional midterms. We're coming up in new districts. I better hear you run it again, right?
Right. Yep. Out there. I mean, Barry and I have been friends. We're colleagues. We in the same area. We probably live within 3 miles of each other, if that, as the crow flies.
Barry Knight.
And
you're in the same district with Barry Knight.
We're in the same district, so we've talked about there may be a friendly primary coming around. So we'll wait and see.
Wow. Okay. Well, now, do you have a website where people who are interested in your campaign can go and learn more about you and maybe contribute or get to know you or reach out and call you?
I do. It's www.glenrdavis.com. It's Glen with 2 N's, the letter R, Davis.com, and they can find out a lot about me, what I've done in the past, working with you, and obviously, support us as we go forward.
Listen, a couple things. Number one, Barry Knight was against small businesses in these games and in favor of casinos. So that should give you one indicator if you're listening to this podcast. That's one contrast that you can draw. I mean, Republicans, we tend to believe in the same kind of things, but there are differences, especially about how we treat our small businesses and how we treat individuals and the like. And I think that's one contrast that you can make. One thing I would tell anybody who's listening with regard to Glenn Here is a man that absolutely understands not just what's good for his district, but that what's good in other districts, in other regions, is good for all of Virginia. That a commonwealth means a common good, and that a rising tide floats all ships. He worked very hard to bring industry into the Danville region, the city of Danville, which has been fighting to gain back in its economic vitality. And this man championed and worked tirelessly for that. And I can't thank you enough for that. I mean, you didn't have to do that, but he did. And so that, when you get Glen Davis in the General Assembly, he's thinking about Virginia Beach, but he's thinking about Southside Virginia. He's thinking about Emporia. He's thinking about all these. Look, he is. He is.
He had to say.
Think about that speeding ticket he got.
How about Emporia?
But not only that. Then I remember I got a bill across from the Senate, and I got chopped up in the House because I guess the VHSL was not paying attention to the Virginia High School League. But I believe that robotics should be made a sport, and that those children, young men and women who participate in athletics, they get a letter, they get recognition, there's a state championship. That it should be for the robotics team, because I always said in robotics the difference between playing sports in high school like we did and somebody engaged in robotics is the chances of Hermie or somebody going pro after playing varsity baseball is very small.
Very small.
The chance of going pro after being on the robotics team is 100%.
Oh yeah.
And let me tell you, on the House side, I've never seen anybody fight so hard for something that wasn't his bill, but just said, look, guys, this is common sense. We lost. Yep. And I can't thank you enough for that kind of tenacity, that kind of advocacy. That really meant a lot to me. And that's why when anything comes over on the Senate side, man, I'm there to help you, Glenn.
Thank you.
If you look at my record, I don't think I voted against anything you've ever done in maybe Medicaid expansion.
Right.
But that's what you need in Virginia. That's the kind of legislator you need. Not a guy that goes up there and likes being called delegate.
Right.
I don't think that matters to you.
Nope.
It's about getting the job done and really leaving that legacy. But you know what happened after all that? He didn't stop. He kept pressing him. I kept pressing him. VHSL made it a sport-type basis with a state championship type that they're rolling out gradually and giving out letters.
Cool.
So we didn't win in legislation, but we intimidated the VHSL enough, and it wasn't just from me. It was a lot of Glen Davis there. So people, when you think about who to vote for, who to send back to the House of Delegates, in my mind, it's a no-brainer because you think about everybody else. You don't think about yourself. Other legislators don't do that. Other legislators get bound up in special interest. I've never seen that with you. You know that there's character and integrity when Glen Davis is sitting on the floor arguing for you and fighting for you. So that means
available
a lot
to come to South Hill for a couple of months.
I am.
Glenn, I wanted, on behalf of all the small businesses that I, by proxy, have been representing in this crusade, certainly not asking you to take a side on one way or the other, but I appreciate what you're doing about being open-minded. I appreciate you taking a look at maybe dropping some legislation to help us try to get this problem fixed fairly and equitably for everybody involved. That's really the end goal of what we're trying to do. So thank you for, taking that stand. And I concur with, Senator Stanley that the people in Virginia Beach have got a decision to make next year. And if you're
seems pretty easy to me.
If you understand the importance of small business and the people that work there and the operators, all the jobs, all the needs that small businesses feel in communities like we live in, you might want to take a good hard look at Delegate Glen Davis. So thank you so much for being here.
And let me tell you one story. This is my favorite Glen Davis story. Glen Davis, I think it's 2019. Last time he ran, I think so. He's running for re-election in the House of Delegates. He puts on his campaign finance report, if I remember correctly, a $44,000 in-kind donation from the Democrat Party because they had run attack ads that he said were so effectively helping him. He felt like he had to give them credit.
You claimed it, huh?
Well, funny story about
genius.
that is, we have our attorney for our for the Republican Party of Virginia, right?
Yeah.
Marsden, I think.
Yeah.
And so I called Chris, and actually my analysis is that they ran all these attack ads against me, and they're all false. And I used them in my own videos, and I used them in my own mail pieces. I used them as I was walking doors, and anytime I saw a group of individuals, I showed them the ads. And I said, Chris, there's an inherent cost for them to print these things. And now I'm using them. I think I have to claim that cost as an in-kind. And he laughed his rear end off and said, Glenn, you can actually interpret it that way. So I did. And the Democrats hit the roof on that one.
Yeah, it was hilarious. They called it a gimmick or something, didn't they?
But the amount of, it was legally done. I was actually investigated. The Democrats actually reached out to our Commonwealth attorney in Virginia Beach, who then had to bring a different Commonwealth attorney in to opine on it. They were investigating me on that, and they said, nope, Glenn was within the law of doing this, but they hit the roof over that one at the Democrat
So the Democrat
side.
Party of Virginia turned out to be one of your bigger donors.
Yep.
That is a great irony, and that demonstrates the character and integrity and also humor that he treats with his job as much as he takes it so very seriously. So, Glen Davis, my hat's off. A tip of the cap to you, my friend.
Bill, thank
you. And thank you for fighting for small business. Look forward to doing that fight one more time. We got another General Assembly session coming up in January, and then we got a great election fight coming up to regain the Senate, maintain the House, and be able to put Glenn Youngkin's very good business-like for small business agenda and for students and for schools and for parents on the fast track and not have them blocked by these brick wall Democrats in the Senate.
Yep,
So,
we're going to get there.
God bless you, Glen Davis. I'm proud and honored to call you friend.
Oh, same here, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Appreciate you being here.
I told you I can bring the heat. I can bring a top-tier guest. I just did it.
Got it.
Just did it.
Okay.
You want me to do it
credit.
again?
Yeah.
Can you be on next week, Glenn? So there you go. So, ladies and gentlemen,
1
a
out of
great
10, not
podcast.
bad.
I mean, how informative. And so, you know, a lot of times we see politicians on TV, they care about the power, they care about getting reelected, they don't care about doing the work. I love when there's just somebody who's sitting there and saying, I'm putting down all that I got to do in my business, all the responsibility I have to come up here and work my tail off. He's the first one usually in the office, last one to leave. I'm not like that totally, but we work 14, 15-hour days. I like to go home and cook, as you know, but we still work, and I wish there were just more of him.
Well, Bill, but it's like you, right? I mean, so when I came as a freshman, there were people I looked to as mentors, and you were one of them, right? Because can you really fight? And you're one of those people on the Senate floor. I mean, you have something you're passionate about. It doesn't matter who's against you. It doesn't matter whether you're going to win or lose that year. You're going to fight for it, and that's what we need more of. And that's I as a freshman and others looked, and you're one of those individuals that we can say, okay, we're gonna model that person, and we know that there is that that light at the end of the tunnel type scenario if you continue the fight for something that is right. So I appreciate it.
Glenn, I got somebody here that kind of could pick up that mantle as well. Living in Southside Virginia, could take on and have the biggest race ever if Louise Lucas moved into the new 17th Senate district. He's sitting right across from you, Hermie Sadler. I mean, wouldn't that be great having him in the legislature? Because he wouldn't give two poops what anybody thought.
You're putting him on the spot.
So we hadn't talked the wrestling thing, but I can only imagine the people you'd be bringing down. I mean, McMahon coming in. I can't imagine. You know.
Well, we've had a lot of people on the show that he's brought on, and they've all said, "Yeah, I'll come give a concert. I'll come do a wrestling show."
Right.
We that would be the most creative and fun campaign to watch. But
Glenn, we use this
like
platform to encourage people as to what Senator's talking about to get involved. You've got to get involved with your school boards, your local town councils, your board of supervisors.
You do.
You've got to get involved and create this grassroots of movement all the way up through Richmond, all the way up to D.C. to make this happen. And you being a business person and taking the initiative to get involved it just says a lot about your character. So
thank you.
Keep encouraging people to get involved.
See, I told you we could talk to him all day. We just about did.
Almost.
Glenn, please come back, and especially
to.
maybe next year. We'll be right here at the Stanley Law Group skyscraper overlooking beautiful capital of the Commonwealth of Virginia here in downtown Richmond. We'll be running this podcast, doing the same thing. Let's come back. Let's do some updates. Let's see where we are. Love to have you back, okay?
Love to do it. Thank y'all.
Hermie, what'd you think?
I like it.
Told you. See, I don't want to hear no crap from you anymore that I can't bring a guest. Okay? You too, Shep. So anyway, we're going to wrap this up. I think it's an amazing podcast. I think we've learned a lot. I think we've...
You have a hard time going off the air, don't you?
I've been inspired.
I'm afraid you're going to read the ad about, from my wife's business. Ladies and gentlemen, we certainly enjoyed it. I'm Virginia State Senator Bill Stanley, and I'm leaning right.
And I'm Hermie Sadler, and I'm turning left. This is Leaning Right and Turning Left with Sadler and the Senator, powered by Pace-O-Matic. Thanks for listening in, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week. God bless y'all.